I didn't notice the forest until the road vanished beneath my feet. It was dusk. At least, I thought it was. But the sky had taken on an unsettling copper tint, as if the sun were bleeding out behind distant clouds. The wind felt wrong too, carrying a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat like regret. My boots scraped over gravel one moment, and the next there was nothing but a hush, a stillness so absolute it seemed to swallow sound. I stopped walking. I don't remember deciding to, but something in the pit of my stomach twisted tight like a warning. Ahead, trees, if you could call them that, rose in serrated silhouettes. Their trunks were glossy, obsidian black, reflective like glass polished by ancient hands. The branches tangled high above like the ribs of some dead titan, sealing off the sky. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked behind me. The road was gone. There was no sign of the cracked asphalt I'd been wandering along for hours. No distant hum of highway. Only more of those black glass trunks, standing silent and severe as judges. I whispered a curse under my breath and felt the syllable vanish too quickly, devoured by the air. Even my breath sounded muted, as though the forest were drinking everything. Sound, light, courage, one gulp at a time. A shiver worked its way down my spine. I didn't want to enter. Every instinct screamed that the forest wasn't supposed to be there, that something unnatural had grafted itself into reality like a tumor. But what other choice did I have? There was no road, no path, no familiar world to retreat to. Only those trees, gleaming faintly in the dying light, and the anxious thrum of my own heartbeat. I stepped forward. The moment my foot crossed into the shadow of the first tree, the forest exhaled. I felt it. Felt the air thicken around me, pressing against my skin like the embrace of something long dead and desperately lonely. My ears popped, and the metallic tang deepened. Tasted like rust, like old blood. I tried to keep calm. You're tired, I told myself. You've been walking for too long without sleep, and your mind is playing tricks. But even the lie didn't feel convincing. The air here had weight, intention, awareness. It watched me. I could feel it watching. I kept moving anyway, forcing my legs to obey, though each step felt like pushing through invisible webs. The deeper I went, the more the darkness changed. It wasn't just nightfall creeping in, it was something thicker, more fluid. Shadows pooled between the trees like ink. They shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them, sliding across the ground in slow, deliberate movements. When I whipped my head around, they stilled, pretending to be nothing unusual. I tried not to think about it. The forest floor was soft, layered with a pale, ash-like dust that puffed up with every step. My footprints lingered far too long, as though the forest wanted to remember me, or track me. Something cracked behind me. I froze. It wasn't a branch, it was sharper, like someone tapping a fingernail on glass. I turned slowly, forcing myself to breathe. Nothing. Only the trees, their surfaces reflecting faint fragments of my silhouette, stretched and warped. My reflection's movements lagged by half a second, as if something else were mimicking me from inside the glass. I didn't stay to study it. I pushed forward, walking faster now, the air thickening around my throat with every breath. Time lost meaning. I don't know how long I wandered, minutes, hours, a lifetime. The copper tint of the sky hadn't faded, but shadows had deepened until they felt alive, pressing close against my legs as though sniffing me. Then, faintly, I heard something. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind. But the words, yes, they were words, slipped into my ears like worms. Do you remember? My stomach turned. I spun around again, whipping the flashlight out of my backpack. Its beam flickered once, then steadied, cutting a pale wound of light into the darkness. Nothing. But the whisper had been so close. My breath came in shuddering bursts now. My fingers trembled around the flashlight. I should have left then. Should have tried to retrace my steps, even if there was no road to go back to. But some part of me felt pinned, trapped between the trees and the thick, strange air. I walked on. Eventually, I stumbled into a clearing, if it could be called that. The trees pulled back just enough to allow a pool of sickly amber light to seep down from the discolored sky. The air felt colder here, as if the forest were inhaling, preparing to speak. At the center stood a figure. My blood iced. It was human-shaped, but only just. A tall, thin silhouette, its edges flickering like candle flame. It was made entirely of shadow, dense, pitch black, swallowing light instead of reflecting it. It didn't have a face, but I felt its gaze like fingers brushing my memories. I stepped back instinctively. It glided forward. My flashlight's beam hit it and the light dimmed, drained. The shadow drank it greedily, its shape swelling, sharpening. I tried to run. A root, sharp as glass, caught my boot, slicing through the leather. I crashed to the ground, my palms scraping against the cold, polished surface of the earth. The flashlight skittered away, sputtering. The shadow figure leaned over me, and then I heard it. Not with my ears, but inside my skull. A voice. What will you give me to leave this place with your mind intact? I wanted to scream, but my throat seized. The air congealed, thickening until it felt like I was drowning in fog. The thing reached out a hand, if you could call it that. Its fingers stretched long and needle-like, dripping shadow. A memory slid loose in my mind. My mother's perfume. That soft lavender scent she used to wear when I was a kid. The last hug she gave me before she died. The warmth of her arms. The memory dimmed, flickered. I cried out. The sound ripped raw from my chest. The figure recoiled slightly, as though tasting my pain. The memory snapped back into place. I scrambled to my knees, gasping, shaking violently. The shadow creature tilted its head, studying me with that eyeless stare. I didn't wait for it to try again. I bolted. Branches tore at my clothes, slicing thin lines across my arms. Shadows lunged at my feet like animals trying to drag me down. My lungs burned, each breath more ragged than the last. The forest blurred around me into a storm of black glass and whispering voices. Do you remember this one? Give it to us. We are hungry. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices were inside me now, rooting through my memories like thieves. I don't know how long I ran. My legs eventually gave out, and I collapsed near a fallen trunk, clutching at the cold bark-like surface. My entire body shook uncontrollably. The voices faded to a low murmur, a constant pressure behind my thoughts. I tried to focus, tried to breathe. Then I realized something horrifying. I couldn't remember why I'd been walking down that road in the first place. I tried to recall the last town I'd been in, the place I'd slept the night before. But the memories were slippery, dissolving the moment I touched them. Panic crushed my chest. The forest had taken something. Not much, not yet, but enough. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I stared up at the tangle of black branches overhead, their smooth surfaces reflecting a twisted version of my own terrified face. I'm getting out of here, I whispered, though I didn't believe my own words. Somewhere behind me, far off yet echoing as though spoken directly into my ear, came a faint rattling sound, a skittering, as if something with too many limbs was moving between the trees. Coming closer, I forced myself onto unsteady legs and moved again, stumbling blindly through the maze of trunks. Every so often I glanced back, certain I'd see that shadow figure trailing behind me like a stain. But there was never anything there, just the shifting dark. At least that's what I told myself. But then the whispering returned, louder now, more insistent. Not just one voice, many. A chorus of hungry murmurs. We remember you. We remember what you've forgotten. Come back. Give us more. I clutched my head, teeth clenched against the rising panic. The forest floor sloped downward suddenly, and I nearly tumbled, catching myself at the last second on a jut of glossy bark. I tasted blood. My lip must have split when I fell earlier. The coppery flavor mixed horribly with the metallic air. Then ahead I saw it, a faint glow. Not the sickly amber of the strange sky, something softer, warmer, white almost like moonlight on snow. I staggered toward it, praying it wasn't another trick, another memory trap. As I drew closer, shapes emerged from the darkness. A structure, small and crooked, nestled between two towering trunks. The cabin. My heart lurched. The glow came from a single window, pale and steady. Someone was inside. Someone human. I reached for the door, my hand shaking violently, and pushed it open. The hinges gave a low groan. The interior smelled of dust, old paper, and something faintly herbal. A candle flickered on a wooden table, illuminating shelves lined with jars and bundles of dried leaves. And in the corner, hunched over a pile of torn journals, sat a woman. She looked up. Her eyes were sunken, dark as the roots outside. Her hair hung in tangled strands around a face that had been beautiful once, perhaps years ago. Now it bore a hollowed, haunted look. She stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "So," she whispered, her voice brittle as dead twigs, "the forest has chosen another." My mouth dried. What is this place?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood slowly and approached me, her steps cautious, as though afraid I would crumble to dust. "I haven't heard another human voice in a very long time," she murmured. "You shouldn't have come." "I didn't exactly have a choice," I snapped more sharply than intended. My nerves were stretched to breaking. There was no road. The forest just appeared. Her expression changed at that. A shadow of pity crossed her face. It always appears when someone carries memories worth devouring. A chill rippled through me. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, a sudden rhythmic tapping struck the window. "Top, top, top." She went still. Her eyes widened, and her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "They've found you." I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped animal. The tapping continued, slow, deliberate, almost conversational. It wasn't the sound of a branch falling or rain hitting the window. This was intelligent. The woman moved toward me, her steps silent, careful. She reached into the folds of her tattered cloak and produced a small, carved pendant. Its surface was dull silver, engraved with symbols that twisted and swirled unnaturally. She held it out, and I instinctively reached for it. "Touch it," she urged. "It will hide you. Temporarily." "Temporarily? From what?" I whispered, but there was no time for more questions. The tapping grew faster, more impatient. I felt the shadows outside. The air itself seemed to ripple. I glanced through the window. Figures had gathered among the black trunks. Human-like, yet wrong. Limbs too long, edges smudged, faces blurred like they had been rubbed away. They moved with an uncanny grace, sliding across the ash-dusted forest floor. Their eyes, when I could see them, burned faintly with hunger. I grabbed the pendant. The instant my fingers touched the cool metal, the world shifted. The shadows outside wavered. The figures faltered mid-step, their forms flickering. The metallic tang in the air dulled, leaving only the suffocating weight of the forest silence. I felt smaller, hidden, like I'd folded myself into the folds of my own skin. "They don't like it when we hide," she murmured. "It's temporary. They will find you eventually. The forest always finds what it wants." "Why me?" The question slipped out, trembling. "Why now?" Her gaze softened slightly, though her eyes remained haunted. "Because you remember. And because you carry more than you know." I frowned. "I don't remember much anymore. That's the problem." "Exactly." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The forest consumes what you forget. The shadow creatures, they are its servants. They crave memory. Not just anything. The memories that matter the most to you, the ones you would die to keep." A shiver ran down my spine. "So they steal them?" She nodded slowly. "And if they devour enough, you cease to exist. Not in the usual way. You still move, speak, and breathe, but you are hollow. A husk. Empty." I swallowed hard. My head spun with disbelief. "This is insane." "Insanity is a luxury," she said softly. "For those who have never touched the forest, once you step inside, reality bends. The forest doesn't care about logic. Only memory. Only hunger, and it always finds a way." I turned toward the window. The figures were gone, at least for now, but the tapping resumed, slower this time, deliberate, like they were mocking my temporary concealment. I could feel them waiting, patient as spiders coiled on silk threads. What do I do?" I asked. My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Move," she said, "and don't stop. Hide when you can. But you cannot rest here. They will find you if you stay. Not here. Not in the open." Her words should have scared me more, but oddly, they gave me focus. I couldn't stay paralyzed by terror, not when the forest wanted me for its feast. I rose unsteadily to my feet, clutching the pendant. She nodded toward a narrow gap in the trunks visible through the window, almost invisible, like a wound in the darkness. "That way," she whispered. "It's the least crowded. But it is not safe. Nothing in this forest is." I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open just enough to slip out, and immediately the cold, metallic air of the forest hit me. My skin prickled. The shadows had returned, pooling low along the roots and ash, flickering in the dim copper light. But the pendant worked. I could feel it humming, a subtle vibration against my chest, and the shadows recoiled from its presence like water from fire. I ran. Branches sliced at my arms and face, the polished trunks looming above me like jagged knives. Every step felt unreal, like running through water, yet faster than I should have been able to. Behind me, faint whispers began again, though muted by the pendant's power. "Remember, give us." I stumbled over a root, sprawling face first into the ash. The impact sent a cloud into the air, and as I coughed, I caught a glimpse of one of the shadow creatures. It had been so close that I could see the faint flicker of distorted faces within its darkness. Faces that resembled people I knew, or thought I knew. My stomach churned. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline burning through the scratches on my skin. The pendant throbbed warmly against my chest. I realized with horror that it wasn't just hiding me. It was reacting to the forest. Protecting me, yes, but also calling attention. I paused, pressing it to my forehead. Closing my eyes, I tried to remember something, anything, to give the pendant fuel. A memory. My father's voice, maybe, or the scent of home. Something solid. My mind was a fractured mess. The forest had already stolen pieces, and I could feel the emptiness where they used to be. A laugh, low and hollow, echoed around me. Not the creatures. Not yet. Something deeper, older. I looked up. The sky had shifted. The copper hue deepened to blood red. Shadows moved unnaturally across the ground, bending as if in waves. And then I saw them. The tallest trees of the forest, rising like towers of black glass. From somewhere deep within their ranks, more shadow creatures emerged. They didn't run. They didn't walk. They glided. And each step, each movement, seemed to resonate with the whispers inside my mind. "We are patient. We are eternal. You cannot hide from us." I swallowed hard, forcing myself forward. My legs trembled with exhaustion and fear, but I pressed on, toward the faint break in the trunks. Each movement felt like dragging my soul along with it. The shadows lingered at the edges of my vision, flickering just beyond the safe radius of the pendant. Suddenly, the forest floor changed. The ash became slick, glass-like, and I realized with growing dread that I was no longer on soil but on the surface of a giant black mirror. Each step reflected my body but distorted. My head elongated, my hands twisted into claw-like shapes. My own reflection was alien. I tripped, falling forward onto my hands, and then I screamed, because in my reflection, the shadow creatures were not behind me. They were in me, in every limb, my face, my chest. They mimicked my every move, eyes glowing faintly with stolen memories. I rolled, scrambled, grabbed the pendant, and pressed it against my chest. The mirror-like ground trembled violently, fracturing in web-like cracks. A high-pitched, keening sound filled my ears, and I felt new, that the forest itself had been disturbed. The woman's voice echoed faintly in my mind, a memory of her words. "The forest always finds what it wants." I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the way my reflections reached out for me from the fractured ground. I ran faster than I thought possible, diving through the narrow gap in the trunks the woman had shown me. The shadows recoiled sharply at the threshold, hissing like water poured onto fire. I emerged onto something else. Not the cabin, not the dense forest, not a road. Just space. Nothingness, yet still oppressive. The ground beneath my feet was ash again, but the horizon, it didn't exist. Darkness stretched infinitely, punctuated only by faint glimmers of copper light, like dying stars. I stopped, clutching the pendant, trying to catch my breath. The whispers were still there, quieter now, muted by distance. But I could feel them lurking at the edges of reality, patient, waiting. And then I realized something worse, something that made my stomach twist in pure terror. I didn't know how long I had been in the forest. Minutes? Hours? Days? Weeks? My watch was gone. My phone gone. Even the sun had betrayed me. Time, like memory, had begun to slip through my fingers. And somewhere, in the infinite dark, I could feel it. The forest, patient and eternal, waiting. I was not safe. I was never safe. The shadows were patient, and they were hungry. I stood in that endless void, clutching the pendant as though it were a lifeline. My lungs burned with every shallow breath, my heart rattling in my chest like a trapped bird. The shadows didn't chase me. Not yet, but I felt them all around, in the air, in my bones. They were waiting. I had to move. I didn't know why, didn't know where, but movement felt safer than standing still. Every step I took was careful, deliberate, though the ground was uncertain. The void stretched endlessly, and each motion echoed unnaturally, like I was walking through some giant, invisible bell. Then I heard it, a faint crunching beneath my feet. Not the ash, not the black glass. Something else. I froze, and then I realized with a cold, sinking dread what it was. My own footprints. Not ordinary ones. Shadows of footprints. Every step I'd taken in the void left behind a faint darkness, as if the forest itself were seeping into this place. I wanted to turn back, but where would I go? Behind me, the endless black, unbroken. Ahead, the same. Only movement mattered. Survival meant moving, even if blindly. I tried to focus. I tried to remember. My mind clawed at fragments. Snippets of life, faces I loved, smells, textures. Each memory I summoned flickered, bright and fragile, like a candle in the wind. And then I felt it, something pulling at them. Shadows, thin tendrils, reaching out to touch the corners of my mind. I screamed, clutching my head, and the pendant pulsed violently against my chest. The darkness recoiled slightly, hissing through the void like a swarm of vipers. I stumbled forward, and then I saw something new. Faint outline. A doorway. Black, jagged, like it had been carved from obsidian itself, yet standing upright, distinct. It was a rectangle of impossible geometry, hovering just above the ground. I didn't know how it existed, but I knew instinctively it was a way forward, or at least a chance. I ran toward it. As I drew near, the shadows surged. They weren't just watching now, they were aware. A cold wind rose from the void, carrying whispers louder than before, clawing at my memories, begging for the fragments I'd fought to hold on to. Give us your past. Give us your life. We are patient. We are eternal. I screamed again, barreled through the doorway. Light. Warm, golden light, soft and enveloping. My knees buckled, and I collapsed on unfamiliar, rough-hewn stone. My lungs gasped, my body shaking, and for the first time in what felt like eternity, the whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. I lifted my head. I was somewhere else. Not the void, not the forest. A room. Ancient, vast, with stone walls covered in carvings I couldn't understand. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke, of something older than time. Torches burned along the walls, casting shadows that moved like living things, but not threatening ones. They were calm, measured, controlled. And then I saw her. Another woman. She appeared out of the shadows at the far end of the hall, tall, elegant, and impossibly old. Her eyes glimmered gold in the torchlight. She did not move as the shadows had in the forest. She walked, sure and deliberate, as though she owned every inch of this place. "You've come far," she said, her voice low and melodic, echoing strangely in the vast hall. "Further than most ever do. But the forest," she shook her head slowly, "the forest always hungers." I scrambled to my feet, clutching the pendant. "Who are you? What is this place?" She smiled faintly, though her gaze was sharp, piercing. "This is a sanctuary, a haven, but temporary. It exists between what is and what is not, between memory and oblivion." I frowned, exhausted and confused. "Temporary? Then I'm still in danger." Her smile faded. "Always. You've escaped its reach, yes, but only because it allows it. The forest is patient. It doesn't devour everything at once. First, it takes what is easiest to reach. Then, it waits, hungering for what remains. And it always finds a way." I pressed the pendant to my chest again, and it pulsed softly, almost reverent in this strange hall. "Why me? Why was I chosen?" Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "Because you remember, and because you carry what it wants most. Memories that are yours alone, memories that define you. Those are the ones it craves. Those are the ones that matter." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Then I'm doomed. I can't let it take everything." "No," she said gently. "You must fight. But the fight is not one of strength. It is one of memory, of will, of knowing what is yours and what must not be given. You must reclaim what is stolen, protect what remains, and learn how to give the forest nothing." I staggered, sinking to my knees. My mind raced. I didn't know where to start. Most of my memories were fragmented. Faces blurred, places dissolved. I couldn't even remember the last time I had eaten, slept, or felt safe. And yet, some things were sharp, painful, precious. My mother's face, my first love, the scent of rain on concrete, my father's voice. I clutched these fragments, willing them to stay. The pendant pulsed more strongly. The woman observed silently, letting me gather strength. "You must go back," she said finally. "The forest never forgets, and it never stops hunting. You cannot flee forever, but you can survive. You can protect yourself. And sometimes, you can turn its hunger against it." "Turn it against itself?" I asked, trembling. "Yes." She stepped closer, placing a hand on the pendant. "It feeds on memory, but it cannot create its own. It only reflects, imitates, absorbs. If you understand how it moves, how it consumes, you can use that knowledge. You can make it hesitate. You can make it hesitate long enough to escape." I nodded weakly, though the thought terrified me. "And if I fail?" Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "Then it will take what remains. Slowly, patiently, eternally. But you still have a chance." I swallowed hard, clenching the pendant. My mind ached, throbbing with fear and exhaustion. But something else stirred, a spark of determination. I had survived the forest so far. I had fought, stumbled, nearly lost myself entirely. And yet here I was, alive. Alive for now. I stood, unsteady but resolute. "How do I start?" She smiled faintly. "You remember first. Everything you can. And then you move." The hall seemed to breathe around me. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering as if in approval or warning, I couldn't tell. Somewhere, deep in the echoing stone, I felt the forest watching, waiting, patient, eternal. And yet, for the first time, I felt something else too, hope. I would go back. I would face it. I would fight the shadows that had stolen parts of my mind. Every memory, every fragment, every stolen shard of my past. I would reclaim them. And if the forest wanted to devour me, I would make it regret it, because I had survived this far, and I would survive further. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sanctuary seep into my bones. The forest would not break me, not yet, and I would return. The sanctuary's torches flickered as I stepped toward the doorway that would lead me back. My hands trembled around the pendant, its warmth a tether to the fragile sense of self I had left. I knew the forest was waiting. I could feel it, patient and eternal, lurking just beyond the boundaries of this world. But I also knew that hesitation would be fatal. I stepped through. The world shifted violently. The stone beneath my feet gave way to ash and glass, the copper-tinged sky above me. The void was gone, or perhaps the sanctuary had been a brief pocket of reality, a blink in the forest's consciousness. The shadows were here again, sprawling across the forest floor, writhing and flickering as if the darkness itself was alive. The first thing I noticed was the silence, or rather, the absence of sound. Not the peaceful absence I'd found in the sanctuary, but a void that pressed against my eardrums, hungry and expectant. My breath echoed unnaturally, bouncing back at me distorted and mocking. I moved cautiously, keeping the pendant pressed to my chest. The shadows recoiled from it, but only slightly. They were still aware of me, always aware. And then I heard them, whispers, many voices layered over each other, murmuring in tongues I didn't know yet somehow understood. Remember, give, lost, broken. I shivered. Each word clawed at my memories, pulling at threads I was only just beginning to hold together. I closed my eyes and focused on the fragments I had gathered in the sanctuary. The faces, the voices, the smells. Each memory became a shield, a faint pulse of resistance against the forest's hunger. The shadows surged closer, reacting to my defiance. They were faster than before, moving with predatory intent. I ran. Branches tore at my arms and legs, slicing shallow ribbons through my skin. I ignored the pain. Only speed mattered. Only survival. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of black glass trunks that bent the eye and warped reality. Every corner, every bend held potential death. I couldn't trust my reflections. They were no longer mirrors of myself but distortions, taunting me with what I had lost. Then I saw it, the cabin. It glowed faintly in the copper twilight, the single window a beacon. The woman was there as if waiting. Relief surged through me, but I forced it down. The forest was patient. It would not allow respite easily. I stumbled into the clearing, collapsing near the cabin. She came forward quickly, placing her hands on my shoulders. "They are stronger now," she said, her voice grim. "You cannot linger. They sense your memories. They know which fragments are precious." I nodded, exhausted, terrified, but determined. "Then what do I do?" "You fight," she said simply. "Not with weapons, not with brute force. With what you carry inside you. Your memories, your will, yourself. The forest feeds on weakness. Strengthen yourself. Make it hesitate. Confuse it. Use its hunger against it." I swallowed hard. My mind raced, desperate to understand how to apply her words. The shadows were relentless, always pressing, always patient. And now, more than ever, they were clever. They knew my fears. They knew my memories. They would exploit anything I left exposed. I could feel the first tendrils reaching for me again, thin strands of shadow brushing against my mind, tasting for fragments. I willed my memories to stand firm, focusing on the warmth of my mother's embrace, the scent of rain on the pavement, the sound of my father's laughter. Each memory became a flare, illuminating the dark corners of my mind, driving the shadows back. But it wasn't enough. The whispers rose to a crescendo, voices overlapping, twisting into a cacophony that threatened to drown me. I clutched the pendant desperately. Its pulse was steady, comforting, a tether to something solid in the midst of chaos. Then the woman spoke, her voice cutting through the noise. "Use it, not just to hide. Use it to reflect them." "Reflect them," I gasped, shaking. "The forest mimics what it cannot consume. Feed it the memories it cannot take without consequence. Make it see itself in you." I understood suddenly. A dangerous plan formed in my mind. I had nothing to lose but the fragments it hadn't yet devoured. If I could turn its hunger against itself, even briefly, I could create an opening, an escape. I forced my focus inward, summoning the memories I had clutched so fiercely. Faces, voices, sensations, all became solid, real in my mind. I could feel the shadows pressing against me, tasting, probing, trying to find weakness. And then, with a thought, I pushed outward. Not physically, but mentally. A wave of memory, bright and unyielding, surged from me, striking the shadows. They recoiled, shrieking in distorted, echoing voices. Shapes twisted, snarled, and fractured as they collided with the light of my mind. I opened my eyes. The forest around me seemed to quiver, as if reality itself were bending under the force. The shadows flinched, some dissolving entirely, others retreating, confused. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just running. I was fighting back. The woman watched, her eyes wide but approving. "Good," she whispered. "Keep it up. Hold them at bay. But do not stop." I pressed the pendant tighter against my chest, willing every fragment of memory I had left to burn brightly. Faces, places, feelings. I poured them into a shield, into a weapon. The shadows surged again, but they hesitated now, recoiling from the force I projected. And then I saw the largest shadow, the figure that had stalked me in the clearing. It advanced deliberately, edges rippling like liquid darkness. But even it faltered, its form distorting as it collided with the brightness of my memories. I focused not on fear, not on the pain, but on what I was fighting for. My past, my identity, everything the forest sought to erase. I let the warmth of memory flow through me, a shield and a lance, a light in the suffocating darkness. The shadow shrieked and lashed out, tendrils of darkness striking toward me. But I did not retreat. I met them with memory, with light, with the fragments of myself it had tried to steal. For a long, unbearable moment, the forest seemed to tremble, the shadows hesitating at the edges of my will. Then, slowly, I moved forward, pushing through the clearing, through the black glass trunks, toward the unknown. The forest, for the first time, felt uncertain, hesitant, vulnerable. But I knew better than to think it was defeated. It was patient, eternal, hungry, and it would return. I didn't stop running. Not now. Not ever. The forest shifted again, more violently this time, as if the earth itself were recoiling. Every step I took echoed across the black landscape, a sharp, insistent rhythm that resonated through my bones. The shadows, for all their hunger, seemed to recede in the face of my memories. But I knew better than to believe I had won. I had only bought myself time. I ran through the endless expanse of twisted trunks, each one like a jagged, broken mirror reflecting fragmented pieces of my mind. The forest was bending around me, warping under the weight of the struggle. It was alive, and it felt me. Felt my fear, my anger, my desperation. It wasn't just hunting me anymore. It was testing me. What will you do next? The forest seemed to ask, its silence deafening. What memories will you give me? The voice wasn't physical. It was in the back of my skull, curling around my thoughts like a cold, slithering thing. I had no answers. I didn't even know how to escape anymore. Every direction looked the same, every path a dead end, every turn a loop that brought me back to the starting point. And then the shadows began to change. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could feel them. They were no longer just shapes. They were people. Faint, flickering outlines, humans but not. They moved with a purpose, their faces indistinguishable, but their eyes burned with something that wasn't hunger. It was something older, something far more dangerous. "We are not what you think," they whispered. I staggered back. The shadows were speaking, but not with their mouths. They didn't need mouths. They spoke directly to my mind, and it was more terrifying than anything I had felt in this cursed forest. There was an intelligence to them, something that understood me, understood how to reach into my very soul. "We are the keepers of what you forget," they hissed. "We are the memories you lose, and we take them gladly." The fear that gripped me now was different. It wasn't just survival, it was dread. The realization crashed over me that the forest wasn't just a predator. It was reality itself, bending to its will. Every lost memory, every forgotten face, every regret. It fed the forest, gave it form. It wasn't simply consuming me. It was devouring the very fabric of existence. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to block out the whispers, trying to force the fragments of my memories to stick. They were fading so fast now, slipping through my fingers like sand. The woman's words echoed in my mind. Strengthen yourself. Fight with what you have left. I felt the pendant against my chest, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. For a moment, it was the only solid thing in this fractured world. I gripped it harder, closed my eyes, and concentrated. Remembered the warmth of the sun on my skin, the sound of my heartbeat in quiet moments. These were my memories, the pieces that made me who I was. I pushed them out. The shadows recoiled, but only for a second. They closed in faster now, as if angered by my resistance. Their whispers turned into screeches, dissonant and maddening. I felt the weight of their presence bearing down on me, pushing me to the edge of insanity. I could feel them touching my memories, poking and prodding, trying to find the weakest parts, the parts one had forgotten, the parts that would make me bleed. You cannot fight us forever, they snarled. You cannot run from yourself. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran. The ground beneath my feet buckled, the ash swirling around me like smoke. The trees bent closer, narrowing the space between them until there was no room to breathe. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat an echo of the forest's pulse. The shadows, relentless, moved with me, matching my every step. They were all around me, crawling beneath my skin, in my thoughts, in my bones. I was losing it. I was losing everything. Then, through the blur of my panic, I saw something. A doorway. It was small, barely noticeable, hidden between two of the twisted trees. The wood of the doorway was cracked, worn, but there was a faint glow emanating from it. Hope, foolish, desperate hope, flared in my chest. I didn't think. I just ran. I reached the doorway and slammed my body against it, praying it would open, praying it would lead me out of this madness. The shadows surged, their cold fingers grazing my back as I shoved against the door, the wood creaking under my weight. It opened. I tumbled through, not caring what was on the other side. Anything was better than the forest. But it wasn't better. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the air shift. The light was different, faint and unnatural, like the dying glow of a forgotten star. The ground was softer here, and I could hear distant sounds, but they were muffled, distorted. The familiar weight of silence hung in the air, as if sound itself had been drained from this place. I looked around. I was in another part of the forest. Or was it the same place? The trees around me were different, but the air was the same, heavy with that metallic taste, that suffocating presence. The black glass trunks stretched far overhead, their jagged shapes cutting through the distorted sky. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I hadn't escaped. I had only wandered deeper. The shadows were still with me, lingering just beyond the edge of my vision, whispering their hungry promises. But there was something else here, something far worse, something older. Welcome home, the voice said, but it wasn't the shadows anymore. No, this was something deeper, something woven into the fabric of the forest itself. You cannot escape what you are, what you remember, what you have lost. My heart dropped. I was no longer in the forest I had known. I had crossed into something else, a place where the shadows did not just hunt, they waited. A place where the echoes of those who had lost themselves were stored, like forgotten relics, hanging in the spaces between the trees. It was a graveyard of memories, of lives consumed by the forest's endless hunger. And as I stood there, surrounded by the quiet murmur of forgotten souls, I realized the truth. The forest didn't just take what you remembered, took everything, took who you were, who you had been, pulled your very essence from the inside out, leaving behind a shell, a shadow of who you used to be. And I was already halfway there. I tried to run again. I tried to push through the black trunks, but the space between them was narrowing, the shadows closing in on me like claws. You can run, the voice said, But it will never be enough. You are already ours. I gasped for air, stumbling backward, but the shadows were already there, filling the air, pressing against my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I could feel the pendant against my skin, still warm, still pulsing, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Then I saw her, the woman from the cabin. She stood at the edge of the clearing, watching me with those ancient, knowing eyes. Her face was sad, resigned. "You're not the first," she said softly, "and you won't be the last." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up as the shadows continued to close in on me. I reached for the pendant, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold it. The whispers grew louder, the weight of the forest pressing down on me like a tomb. "We are waiting," the voice said, "waiting for you to remember. And when you do, we will take what remains." I was so close to losing it all, so close to fading into nothing. But then, there, in the deepest part of my mind, I felt something else. A spark. A fragment of who I was, who I used to be. Something I had thought long forgotten. And I clung to it. The spark was fragile, but it was there. In the depths of my mind, a flicker of something real. Something me. I couldn't let go of it. Not now. The shadows were closing in, suffocating the space between breaths. But I clung to that fragment, even as the darkness clawed at my soul. "Who are you?" The voice was gentle at first, a whisper against the storm. It was no longer the shadows, but something else, something more personal. It was the forest, but also me. The part of me that still remembered. The part of me that hadn't been consumed by the hunger yet. "I am me." I could feel the words forming in my mind, but they weren't my voice. They were the voice of the forest, shaped from my own thoughts, distorted by its hunger. But I fought back, pushing against the wave of darkness, against the tendrils that tried to pull me into their grasp. The pendant thrummed violently against my chest, its pulse a steady beat in the chaos. I pressed it harder, willing its warmth to grow, to protect me, to reclaim what I had left. My memories, my essence, they were mine. The forest could not take them. Not completely. "But you have already lost so much," the voice of the forest murmured. "Do you remember who you are?" I hesitated. The question gnawed at me, stirring the emptiness inside, pulling at the fragile threads of my identity. I couldn't remember everything. I couldn't remember the small things, the days, the faces, but I remembered the important things. The love, the pain, the laughter, the moments that made me who I was. The forest's whispers were insistent, louder now, a symphony of voices swirling around me, clawing at the edges of my mind. But I didn't falter. Couldn't. I focused. I pulled the memories I had left from the dark corners of my mind and forced them into the light. Every second, every emotion, every flash of warmth. I made them real again. I made them my weapon. The forest recoiled. It felt me. Felt the strength I was building, the power I was drawing from my very essence. It had fed on my fear, on my confusion, but now it was feeding on my will. And that made it angry. The shadows writhed violently, thrashing through the air as if in pain. The once dead air around me began to hum, a deep, resonant sound vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. The dark shapes stretched and twisted, coiling like snakes, their movements jerky and erratic. The woman was still standing at the edge of the clearing, her eyes watching me intently. She stepped forward, her presence calming, though her expression remained sorrowful. "It is time," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "You have taken the first step, but the forest will not relent. Not until you take everything back." "What do you mean?" I gasped, my breath coming in ragged pulls. The shadows were drawing closer, swirling in tight circles around me. I could feel their hunger again, the sharp pull of memory slipping away. "The forest is not just a place," she said, her voice echoing as though from a great distance. "It is a force, a parasite that feeds on more than just your memories. It feeds on your very being. And when it has taken everything, when you are no more than a shell of yourself, it will move on to the next soul. And the next. And the next." I shook my head, struggling to breathe through the pressure in my chest.
No.
I can't let it take me. I won't let it. You cannot fight forever, she replied, her voice somber. The forest does not relent. It waits patiently, eternally. But, she paused, her gaze flickering briefly to the pendant around my neck. If you wish to survive, if you wish to leave this place with what remains of you intact, you must do more than just fight. You must unmake the forest. I stared at her, disbelief surging in my veins. Unmake it? How? How do I do that? The forest thrives on your memories, your emotions, your fears, she said, her voice growing softer. But it is not invincible. It is not alive in the way you think. It is only powerful because you have allowed it to be. You've fed it with your confusion, with your desperation. But if you can take back control, if you can stop giving it your fear, it will lose its power. I didn't understand, not fully, but I was running out of time. The shadows were closing in, faster now, surrounding me. The whispers were almost deafening, an incoherent jumble of voices that made my head spin. You have to decide, the woman said. Do you want to hold on to what is yours, or will you give it to the forest? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't want to lose myself. I didn't want to fade into the shadows. I had to fight, truly fight, not just for survival but for the right to remember who I was. I will fight, I said, my voice hoarse but steady. I won't give it up. I won't give it anything. I opened my eyes. The shadows flinched, a wave of dissonant sound rolling through the air like a storm. They shrank back, faltering at the edges of my memories. I felt their hunger, their twisted desire to claim what was mine. But they were weaker now. The woman smiled, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. Then do it. Make them feel you. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. And then I let go. The forest had no claim on me. I remembered who I was, what I was. I remembered every sharp, beautiful moment, the laughter of a loved one, the touch of a hand that had once cared for me, the warmth of sunlight on a summer morning. These memories were mine. They belonged to me, not the forest, not the shadows, and I would never let them take them from me. I raised my arms, forcing every memory I had left to the surface, pushing it outwards, into the air. I poured it all into the pendant, into the space between my heart and the abyss around me. The light it gave off was blinding, hot and fierce. The shadows shrieked, the cacophony of their voices rising in a chorus of agony. They were not used to this. They were not used to being defied. I felt the force of the forest waver, like a massive tidal wave crashing against a rock. For the first time, the shadows hesitated, flickering like flames caught in a strong wind. And that was enough. I ran. I ran through the cracks of the forest, through the fractured light, through the waves of sound and silence that had once swallowed me whole. My feet barely touched the ground. The darkness around me pulsed, but now it was retreating. It was pulling back, unable to withstand the light of my memories. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. The forest would return. It would always return. But for now I was free. The light of my memories, the warmth of what I was, rushed through me, burning bright and fierce as I ran. The shadows faltered, recoiling from the pulse of resistance, but they were not defeated. Not yet. I was moving, but everything felt disjointed, like I was running through a dream where the ground beneath my feet didn't quite exist, and the air was too thin to breathe. The forest stretched out before me, infinite, shifting, the trees whispering and bending like broken glass, every one of them a mirror of a part of me I had left behind. But now, for the first time, I felt their hunger wane. The air felt lighter, the pressure on my chest less suffocating. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had truly broken free. I thought I had won. But then I heard it, a low, keening howl, like the wind screaming through the shattered branches of the glass trees. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and I stumbled, almost falling, my hands scrambling for anything to hold on to. And then the shadows surged. This time, they weren't just reaching for me. They were moving together, a collective force, an intelligent swarm, surrounding me in an endless wave of darkness. Their whispers had become maddening, overlapping in a cacophony that distorted every thought, every memory. "You cannot escape, child," the voice of the forest said, no longer an echo but a single, omnipresent voice that filled every inch of my mind. "You have tried to take from us what you cannot keep. You have only delayed the inevitable." I gasped for air, clutching the pendant against my chest. The light from it flickered weakly, like a candle that had been burning for too long. The shadows closed in, tightening their grip, and I felt the cold touch of them against my mind once more, clawing at the fragile remnants of who I was. "You belong to us now," the voice murmured, sweet and cold. "We are eternal. You are nothing but a reflection." I closed my eyes, shaking, trying to shut out the voices, trying to hold on to that spark of light I had found. But it was weakening. The shadows were pulling at it, unraveling it, piece by piece, as they had done to so many before me. I could feel my memories slipping away again, as if they were being erased from the inside out. And then, just as the weight of their hunger seemed ready to crush me, I felt it again. The spark. Not a memory, not a face, not a name, but something else, a force, a will to live. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't about holding onto the fragments of my past. It was deeper than that. It was the core of who I was, the part of me that had fought from the very beginning, that had refused to be consumed. The forest, for all its hunger, could not devour that. I opened my eyes. The shadows paused, just for a moment. The voice, now a whisper, seemed uncertain. "What is this?" I took a deep breath and fought back. Not with memories, not with the broken remnants of my past, but with the one thing the forest could not touch, the strength that came from knowing that I was still me. The force of will that said I would not let the darkness consume me. The pendant flared brightly, its pulse steady now, resonating with the power that surged from deep inside me. I raised it into the air not as a shield but as a weapon. The light exploded outward, a blinding, pure radiance that pushed the shadows back, repelled them like a tide rushing against the shore. "No!" the voice howled, shrill and furious, as the light cut through the air like a blade. "You cannot defeat us. We will take you." The shadows twisted, but they were slow now, faltering in the face of my resolve. The forest trembled as if in pain, as if the very earth itself was being torn apart. I could feel it, the forest fighting to maintain its grip, its hold on me. But it was too late. I stepped forward. With every step, the forest cracked. The shadows recoiled, their forms splintering like broken glass. The light from the pendant bathed everything around me, washing away the darkness, revealing the twisted shapes of the trees, the fractured ground, the jagged edges of a place that had been alive but was now fading, dying. And then I heard it, the faintest sound. A whisper. A voice. "It's not over." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The voice wasn't from the shadows. It wasn't from the forest. It was coming from somewhere else. I looked around, trying to see through the shifting mists of the forest. There, in the distance, beyond the splintering trees, I saw a figure. It was her, the woman from the cabin. But she wasn't standing alone. A crowd of figures surrounded her, their outlines blurred, faces indistinguishable, but their presence unmistakable. They were the lost ones, the souls that had wandered into this place and never returned. They were the echoes of those who had been consumed by the forest, their memories stolen, their identities erased. And they were now waiting. The woman stepped forward, her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of recognition in them. Her expression softened, just slightly, as she spoke. "You are stronger than they thought. Stronger than any of them," she said. "But the forest is not easily undone. You are still here, but this is not the end." I shook my head, desperate to understand. "What do you mean? What are you trying to say?" "The forest is part of the world," she said, her voice distant and sorrowful. "It is not simply a place. It is an echo, a force, born from what is forgotten, what is lost. And it will always hunger." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers, but my throat was tight. The forest, the place I had been running from, was alive. It wasn't just a cursed, haunted space. It was something far older, far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. It fed on the forgotten, and as much as I fought, there would always be more lost souls, more memories to consume. The woman reached out, her hand extended, not in invitation, but in warning. You can leave this place, but you must understand, the forest will never stop. It will always find a way to return. It will always want. The shadows around me began to stir again, slithering in the corners of my vision. I could feel the pull of them, their hunger, but I stood tall, my chest rising and falling with each breath. The pendant in my hand was still warm, still bright, still a beacon against the growing darkness. And for a moment I didn't feel afraid. I will fight, I thought, my voice firm in my mind. I will not be forgotten. The woman nodded, her gaze sad. You will remember, and that will be your strength. The shadows closed in again, but this time I didn't run. I held my ground, the light from the pendant flaring once more, pushing the darkness away. The forest was not finished with me, but I was not finished with it either. The shadows surged once more, but I felt no fear. The forest had taken everything it could, but it had underestimated me. I wasn't just running anymore. I wasn't just fighting to keep my memories. I was fighting for something deeper, something that could never be stolen. The light of the pendant pulsed brightly in my hand, a shield against the encroaching darkness. The shadows recoiled, their forms contorting in frustration. They were no longer just hungry, they were angry. The forest, the force that had haunted me from the moment I stepped into this cursed place, was realizing that I was not as easily consumed as the others. The woman stood in the distance, watching with a gaze that felt both distant and intimate, as if she were witnessing the final act of a play she had long ago come to understand. Her eyes flickered with something that might have been hope, or pity. You've come so far, she said, her voice carrying over the wind, barely more than a whisper. But now you must face the truth. What truth? I demanded, my voice hoarse. The shadows still circled, pressing in from all sides. They were stronger than before, fueled by a hunger that had only grown since I first arrived. But I wasn't backing down. The forest has always been here, she continued, stepping closer, her face almost obscured in the shadows. It was born from something ancient. It's more than a place, more than a curse. It is an echo of everything that has been lost. All the memories, the pain, the sorrow. It is the keeper of the forgotten, the eternal reminder of what we leave behind. I took a step back, a chill running down my spine. The forest was not just an enemy. It was a part of something far older, a force that existed long before I had ever stepped into it. It was a manifestation of everything humanity had discarded, forgotten, or failed to hold on to. It was the very embodiment of loss. But I can stop it, I said, almost more to myself than to her. I fought it off.
Ever resisted?
The pendant, it's a weapon. I can make it stop. The woman's eyes softened. The pendant is a tool, but tools are only as strong as the hand that wields them. Her voice was quiet, but her words were sharp, a blade cutting through the fog of my understanding. And even the strongest of hands cannot undo what has already been done. The forest feeds on what is lost, and you cannot fight that with willpower alone. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, an awful sense of inevitability sinking in. The pendant had been my lifeline, my refuge, my only weapon in this battle. But it wasn't enough. The forest was too vast, too ancient. It wasn't just a creature to be slain. It was a part of the world, a manifestation of something beyond my understanding. Then what am I supposed to do? My voice cracked, the desperation creeping in again. I can't just give up. I can't let it take me. Let it take everyone. The woman's gaze was full of sorrow, but there was something else there too. You are not alone in this fight, she said. You never were. The others, they are still here too. She gestured to the shadows that surrounded us. They were shifting now, less like the mindless predators they had been and more like whispers, voices, fragmented, disembodied, but still carrying remnants of who they had once been. Their forms were no longer distorted or formless. There was something human about them now. You mean the lost souls? I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. The ones who came before me? Yes, she said, nodding. They have not been consumed entirely. Not all of them. Some still linger in the forest, trapped between the darkness and the light, between memory and oblivion. They are lost, but they are not gone. You can call them back. I took a step forward, confusion clouding my thoughts. Call them back? How? She looked at me as though I should have already known the answer. The forest is a reflection of all that has been forgotten. But it is not the memories alone that fuel it. It is the connections, the bonds we form with others. The love, the loss, the pain. You must reach out to those who have been lost to the forest, and you must remind them of who they were. Remind them, I whispered, the weight of her words sinking in. I had spent all this time trying to preserve my own memories, but I had never once thought about those who had come before me, those who had been taken by the forest, forgotten by time. Yes, she said, the forest is fueled by isolation, by the separation of memory. But even here, even in the deepest shadows, there is connection. The bonds you share with those who have gone before can become your strength. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what she was asking me to do. It was a terrifying thought. Reach out to the lost souls? How? I had been running for so long, fighting for my own survival, that I had forgotten the one thing that made me human. My connection to others. I felt a flicker of recognition, the spark I had clung to, the thing that had kept me from being consumed. It was them, the people I had loved, the memories I had clung to. I hadn't just been fighting to survive. I had been fighting to hold onto them. If I can remember them, I can reach them. I took a deep breath. The forest might feed on the forgotten, but I would not forget. I would not let them be lost to the shadows. I raised the pendant once more, its light flickering in my hand, and then I closed my eyes. I reached out. The shadows stirred, but this time I was not afraid. I called out softly, but with all the strength I had left. I called out to those who had been lost, to the ones whose names had been stolen by the forest, whose faces had long since faded from memory. I called out to my family. I called out to the people who had once meant everything to me. And then I felt them, a warmth, a familiar presence, like a hand on my shoulder, a voice, faint but unmistakable. You're not alone. I felt the surge of memories, of faces, of love, of laughter, rushing toward me. They were not just my memories. They were the echoes of those who had come before me, those who had loved and lived, those whose light had once burned bright but had been dimmed by the forest's hunger. They were returning. The shadows shrieked in frustration, their forms twisting, retreating. But the warmth grew stronger. The light around me blazed, radiating out in all directions. I could feel them, the lost souls, gathering at the edges of my consciousness, rising up from the darkness. They were not consumed. They had not been forgotten. The forest trembled. It shuddered beneath the weight of our memories. No, the voice of the forest hissed, its tone bitter and defeated. You cannot stop us. But the shadows were already dissipating, pulled back by the force of the memories that were coming back. The very thing that had made the forest strong, the isolation, the forgetting, was unraveling. The bonds between us, the connections that had once been severed, were now strengthening, becoming an unbreakable web that held the shadows at bay. And the woman, who had watched all this unfold, gave me a single, approving nod. It is not over, she said softly, but you have begun to turn the tide. The forest around us was still, the shadows retreating into the distant corners of my mind. For the first time I felt peaceful. The battle wasn't over, but the forest had been weakened. And I knew now, deep down, that I was no longer alone in this fight. The lost souls were with me, and together we would face whatever darkness still lingered. The forest was no longer the same. The shadows that had once swarmed around me like ravenous beasts were now distant, retreating into the corners of my mind. Their presence was still there, but it was no longer oppressive, no longer a suffocating weight that threatened to crush me. They had lost something, their edge, their hunger, their ability to consume. But I could feel the pulse of the forest. It was still alive, still waiting. The fight was far from over. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest, the pendant still warm in my hand. The light it emitted had grown stronger, but it wasn't enough to banish the shadows entirely. They lingered, curling at the edges of my vision, like smoke that refused to dissipate. The woman, the lost soul who had helped me, stood silently behind me. Her eyes were full of understanding, but also a quiet sadness. She knew what I had just learned. The forest did not easily give up. It was patient, eternal, and it had a way of luring you back when you least expected it. "You did well," she said softly, her voice like a breeze through the trees. "But the forest is always waiting. It will never let you go until it has taken everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle on me. "I won't let it take me. I won't let it take anyone." The shadows flickered again, as if they were testing my resolve, skimming over my skin like cold fingers. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to ignore the creeping dread. Couldn't let it break me. Not now. The woman stepped closer, her form flickering like an image in a cracked mirror. "You must remember, you are not just fighting for yourself. There are others, many others, who are still here, still trapped. They cannot escape without your help." I glanced around, but the clearing we stood in seemed empty, save for the twisted, black glass trees that towered above us. The shadows writhed at the edges of the clearing, but no one else was visible. Who are you talking about?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. "The ones who came before," she said. "The lost souls, the ones who walked this path and were consumed by the forest. They are still here, still wandering, still waiting for someone to remember them, to bring them back." The words hung in the air, heavy and insistent. I could feel the forest's pulse, its hunger, throbbing beneath my feet, but it was no longer just a presence. It was something else now, something that I had to face. The forest wasn't just consuming memories. It was stealing lives, taking people, erasing them from existence, trapping them in the labyrinth of shadow and glass. "They're gone," I said, my voice faltering. "How can I bring them back? They've been lost for so long." "They are not gone," she replied softly. "They are merely forgotten." I swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. I had only just begun to grasp the full scope of the forest's power, the way it fed on isolation, on the things we left behind. But to bring back the lost souls? Could it even be done? "You can," she said, as though reading my thoughts. "If you remember them, if you reach them." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle on my chest. I had been so focused on my own survival, so obsessed with holding on to my own memories, that I had never stopped to think about those who had already been consumed by the forest. The memories of the lost souls, those who had wandered in and never returned, were still here, still waiting to be remembered. I felt a spark, an ember of something that I had long ago pushed aside. The faces of those I had loved, the ones who had disappeared from my life, flickered in the darkness of my mind. My family, my friends, my lovers. All of them had been swept away by time, by loss, by the cruel, suffocating grip of the forest. But they weren't gone. Not completely. I could feel them, faint but unmistakable memories that had been clouded by the passing years, by the weight of fear, by the consuming darkness. They had left behind echoes, whispers, traces of who they had been. And if I could reach those whispers, I could call them back. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the pendant. I didn't know if I had the strength to do this. I didn't know if I could bring them back. But I knew one thing: I had to try. The woman stepped back, giving me space, her form almost disappearing into the shadows. Her eyes, though distant, still held that quiet hope. "Remember, that is all you must do. Remember." I closed my eyes again, focusing on the memory of my family. My mother's smile, my father's laugh, the feeling of their arms around me, the safety of their love. They were with me in every moment I had ever shared with them. They were still here, buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for me to remember. And then I reached out. I reached into the depths of the forest, into the place where memory and time collided, where shadows and light intertwined. I called out to them, not in words, but in feeling, in essence. I reached for them, pulling on the threads that connected us, the bonds that had never truly been broken. First, there was nothing. The shadows continued to twist around me, pressing closer, testing my resolve. But I didn't stop. I focused harder, pushing past the fear, past the isolation, reaching into the dark. And then I felt it. A flicker, a flash, a moment of recognition, a voice. I remember you. The sound was faint, like a whisper carried on the wind. But it was there, and it was enough. My heart surged with a rush of warmth. The shadows hesitated, and for the first time, I felt the light inside me grow stronger. It was a force I could not explain, a power I had never known I possessed. The forest recoiled, its grip on me loosening, just for a moment. And in that moment, I felt the presence of them. The lost souls. They were with me. They were not gone. They had not been forgotten. They had only been waiting for someone to remember them. The shadows around me began to retreat, their forms shrinking back into the distance. The trees, once jagged and broken, began to shift, the black glass shimmering with a faint glow. It was as if the forest itself had taken a step back, recognizing that I was no longer alone. I could hear their voices now, a chorus of whispers, each one a lost soul, a memory that had been reclaimed. They spoke in fragments, in half-formed thoughts, but their presence was undeniable. They were here. They had returned. I opened my eyes, feeling the energy around me shift. The woman, standing at the edge of the clearing, watched with a mix of sadness and awe. "You've done it," she said softly. "You've given them back what the forest stole." But even as I stood there, surrounded by the flickering presence of the lost, I knew that the battle wasn't over. The forest was still alive, still waiting. The shadows had not been vanquished. They had only been pushed back for now. And the forest was watching. The wind shifted, a cold breath brushing past my skin, and I knew that it wasn't over. The forest might have retreated, but it was only a temporary lull. The shadows were still there, swirling just beneath the surface, waiting for their chance to strike again. I stood in the clearing, surrounded by the lost souls I had managed to call back. Their presence, though comforting, was not enough to push away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The light from the pendant flickered, its glow still bright but not as strong as it had been before. It pulsed with a rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat, but it was slowing, growing weaker as the darkness around us began to shift again. The woman, the one who had helped me, stepped closer, her figure becoming clearer as she emerged from the shadows. Her eyes were full of something I couldn't quite read. Worry? Regret? But she didn't speak immediately. She simply watched the forest, her gaze sweeping over the twisted, glass-like trees and the swirling shadows that were now edging back into the clearing. "The forest will never stop," she said, her voice soft but heavy with truth. "It will always find a way to return, no matter how many times you push it back." I looked at her, my chest tight, but I couldn't bring myself to ask her what I really wanted to know. What was the forest, truly? Where did it come from? What was its purpose? And why had it chosen me? But instead, I said the only thing that mattered. "I won't let it take them," I said, my voice firm, though I could feel the cracks starting to show. The shadows were closing in, moving in strange, unpredictable patterns. They were watching me, waiting for the right moment, and I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "You cannot stop the forest by fighting alone. It is not a battle of strength. It is a battle of memory, of connection." I swallowed hard, trying to understand her words. The fight had never been about physical. Strength, never about wielding the pendant like a weapon. It was about something deeper, something that lived in the space between us and the shadows. It was about remembering, about reaching those who had been lost, and not letting them fade into nothing. You have taken the first step, the woman continued. But now you must go deeper. You must learn to embrace what the forest offers, not as a way to fight it, but as a way to understand it. I blinked, confused. Understand it? You want me to let it? No, she interrupted, shaking her head. Not let it, but learn from it. The forest is a reflection of everything that has been forgotten, every soul that has wandered into its depths. It is not just an enemy to be vanquished. It is a mirror, a reflection of what you are running from, what you are afraid to face. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The forest reflected everything I had buried deep within myself, everything I had lost, everything I feared losing again. It wasn't just the memories of others that the forest fed on me. Then what do? I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. How do I stop it if it's part of me? If it's part of everything? She didn't answer immediately, her gaze distant, as if she were looking beyond me, beyond the forest itself. You must learn to remember all of it, she said at last. Not just the good, not just the love and the light. You must face the darkness too, the pain, the things you would rather forget. Her words hung in the air like a shadow, heavy and oppressive. I didn't want to face that part of myself. I didn't want to remember the pain, the loss, the things I had buried so deeply that I could barely even recall them. But I knew deep down that she was right. The forest had grown strong on my fear of what I had lost. The only way to truly defeat it was to face those memories head-on, to reclaim the parts of myself that I had tried to escape. The ground beneath me trembled again, a low hum vibrating through the air. The shadows were gathering, pressing in on the edges of the clearing. They were stronger now, coiling like serpents, moving with purpose. The forest was waking up. It was getting ready to strike. I took a step back, clutching the pendant in my hand. The light flickered, stronger for a moment, but still not enough to banish the growing darkness. The lost souls around me were still there, but their presence felt faint, like echoes of a forgotten song. I had to do something. Face it, the woman's voice said, breaking through my panic. Face the darkness within you, and the forest will lose its hold. I looked down at the pendant, my breath shallow. It had helped me before, but now I wasn't sure if it could help me again. The shadows were too strong, the forest too vast. But I couldn't just give up. Not now. Not when I had come so far. The memories of the lost souls, of those who had been taken, were with me now. They were part of me, and I wouldn't let them fade into the abyss again. I closed my eyes, and then I reached deep inside myself. The shadows pressed in closer, their forms twisting and stretching, curling around me like dark, suffocating tendrils. I could feel them, like fingers clawing at my skin, pulling at my thoughts, trying to consume me. But I didn't recoil. I didn't pull away. I embraced it. I remembered the pain, the loss of my family, the emptiness that had settled in after their disappearance. I remembered the moments I had pushed aside, the things I had buried beneath layers of fear and grief. The darkness wasn't just something the forest had created. It was something I had built within myself. The shadows were not an external enemy. They were part of me, but they didn't have to define me. With every painful memory, with every fear I had locked away, I fought back. I didn't try to run from it. I didn't try to hide from the darkness inside me. I faced it, and in facing it, I could feel the light within me grow stronger. The pendant pulsed brightly, its light spreading out like a wave, washing over the shadows, pushing them back. The whispers of the lost souls surrounded me, faint at first, but growing louder. Their voices mingled with mine, filling the air with a soft hum. They were not lost anymore. They were remembered, and in remembering them, I had reclaimed a part of myself. The forest trembled again, its form shifting, changing. The shadows writhed, but they weren't as strong as before. They were faltering, disoriented by the light that now filled the clearing. I opened my eyes. The clearing was no longer dark. The trees, once jagged and black, now shimmered faintly, their broken glass-like surfaces reflecting the soft light that poured from the pendant in my hand. The shadows were still there, lingering at the edges, but they were weaker. The hunger that had once pulsed through the forest was no longer there. It had been satisfied, not by me running or hiding, but by confronting what I had buried. Inside, I had faced the darkness within me, and in doing so, I had denied the forest the power to control me. The woman's figure flickered once more, her eyes meeting mine. There was no pity in her gaze now, only quiet approval. "You have done it," she said softly. "But this is only the beginning. The forest will try again. But now you know what to do." I nodded, my heart pounding, but the fear was gone. I had learned the truth. The forest fed on loss, on memory, on pain, on what we refused to face. But I had faced it, and I was stronger for it. I wasn't running anymore. The forest wasn't gone. It had only been pushed back. But that didn't mean the battle was over. It had only just begun. I stood in the clearing, the light from the pendant still pulsing, still holding the shadows at bay. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and shattered glass. The trees, once black and broken, had softened. They no longer seemed as threatening. But I knew the truth now. The forest was a living thing, and it was always watching. It was patient. The woman who had guided me, the lost soul whose face had become so familiar, was standing just behind me. Her expression was somber, but not hopeless. I had done what she asked, and I had succeeded, but only in part. The forest had been repelled, yes, but it was still there, just beyond the edge of the clearing, lurking in the shadows. "You're not free yet," she said quietly. Her voice was a whisper against the rustling of the trees. "The forest will come again. It never stops." I didn't turn to face her. I kept my eyes on the darkness, on the way the trees seemed to shift and breathe with a life of their own. The shadows were no longer a force, a terrifying blanket that swallowed everything whole. They were now more like a presence, a weight in the back of my mind, a constant reminder that the forest was alive. "I won't let it take me," I said, the words almost a vow. I wasn't sure where the strength came from, but I knew now that the forest could not define me, could not break me. "I've learned what I need to. I'll keep fighting." The woman's voice was distant, like she was fading into the trees. "It's not a matter of fighting," she said. "The forest isn't just an enemy to be defeated. It's a part of you, a part of the world. It feeds on what is lost, what is forgotten. But it is not just destruction. It is creation, too." I turned toward her then, my breath catching in my throat. Her form flickered, like a mirage, the edges of her body fading into the air. She was becoming less solid, less real. "What do you mean?" I asked. "How can it be both?" She paused, her gaze never leaving mine. There was something in her eyes, a recognition, a sorrow. The forest was born from memory, from the things we forget. But what you have to understand is that it isn't just about what is lost. It's also about what is created by that loss. The shadows, the hunger, they are not the forest's only face. The darkness gives way to light, but light is never without its shadow. Her words felt like a riddle, slipping through my fingers like sand. I wanted to ask more, to push for answers, but the forest itself seemed to shift around us, the shadows lengthening, pressing in, like they were waiting for something. Waiting for her to leave, waiting for me to make a choice. "I don't understand," I said, my voice thick with frustration. "How can the forest be part of the world, and yet be something I have to fight? How can I even defeat something that's part of me?" She took a slow step forward, her feet barely touching the ground, her form shimmering like a reflection in a broken mirror. Her voice was quieter this time, more like a whisper carried on the wind. "Because you are not just fighting for survival," she said. "You are fighting for meaning. The forest, it represents what happens when we forget, when we run from the pain, from the loss. But it is not just a force of destruction. It is also a force of creation, of rebirth. The things that you fear losing, the memories, the faces, the love, they are not gone. They are just waiting for you to remember them, to bring them back into the light. I took a step back, my mind racing. The forest fed on what we lost. But it also created something in that loss. A shadow, a reflection, a reminder that even in forgetting, there was still something that remained. The ground beneath me trembled again. The shadows pressed closer, their forms taking shape, no longer just vague, flickering shapes but something more solid, something that seemed to know exactly what it wanted. The woman's voice broke through my thoughts, sharp and urgent. "It's coming." I didn't need to ask what she meant. The forest was coming alive, the shadows swirling faster now, gathering in the corners of the clearing, stretching and pulling themselves together, like an enormous tide pulling in. The light from the pendant flared, but it felt weaker, as though it was struggling to hold back the encroaching darkness. But this time I wasn't afraid. Not like before. The shadows still clawed at me, pressing against my mind, but I was no longer running from them. I wasn't trying to escape. I had faced the darkness inside me, and I had learned its name. It wasn't just fear. It was loss. I raised the pendant again, feeling its pulse within me. The light flickered, but it was steadier now, drawing on something deeper, something I hadn't known was there. The forest, with all its hunger, with all its consuming shadows, had shown me what I had buried for so long. The memories of my family, my friends, the people I had loved and lost. They were all a part of me, and I wasn't going to let them fade again. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memory of my mother's face, my father's laugh, the warmth of their arms around me, the feeling of being loved, of belonging. I called out to them, not in words, but in the deepest part of me, the part where everything I had ever loved still lived. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering. The pulse of the pendant grew stronger. And then, I felt it, a flood of warmth, a rush of energy that was not my own. The lost souls, the ones I had called back, were with me. They were standing at my side, their voices rising up in a chorus of memory, of love, of life. The forest's hunger couldn't take them, couldn't take us. The light from the pendant exploded outward, a wave of radiant force that pushed the shadows back, sweeping over the glass-like trees, over the ground, over the very air. The forest shuddered as if struck by a great blow. The shadows writhed, shrieking in frustration, but they couldn't reach me anymore. They couldn't touch the memory that had now been resurrected. For a moment, the forest stood still, and then it began to fade. The trees, once so jagged and broken, now shimmered with a soft light. The glass-like trunks reflected the light from the pendant, and the air itself felt lighter, less suffocating. The darkness retreated into the corners, unable to find purchase, unable to reach me. The forest wasn't gone, but it had been weakened. The woman, now fading into the air, her form nearly transparent, spoke once more, her voice soft but full of finality. "You have done what was needed, but this is not the end. The forest is always waiting. It will always find a way to return. But you now know how to fight it." I nodded, my heart heavy but steady. The forest hadn't won. Couldn't. Not as long as I remembered. As the shadows faded and the light from the pendant dimmed, I turned toward the woman, but she was already gone. The clearing was empty, the forest still, the shadows retreating. I had done it, and now the real battle would begin. The forest was still, too still. The last remnants of the shadows dissolved into the air, but the clearing felt empty in a way that was almost worse than the suffocating darkness I had just fought back. The woman, if she had ever truly been real, was gone, leaving behind nothing but the echo of her words. The forest will always find a way to return. I could still hear them in the back of my mind, ringing like a warning. The pendant hung heavy in my hand, its light now flickering, faint but steady. The warmth I had felt when it first surged through me had faded, leaving only a quiet pulse. It was as though the forest itself had taken a deep breath and was now holding it, waiting for something, anything, to tip the scales. I looked around. The forest had shifted. The trees, no longer dark and jagged, now shimmered with a strange, iridescent glow. The ground beneath my feet was firm again, no longer quaking with the pulse of the forest's hunger. The air felt lighter, less oppressive, but it still carried the scent of damp earth and broken glass. The remnants of the forest's dark power were still there, just hidden beneath the surface, waiting. The lost souls, those I had reached out to and brought back from the depths of the forest, stood at the edges of the clearing. They were silent, their forms barely more than faint, shifting shadows, but their presence was enough. I could feel them, the faint echoes of lives once lived, of memories once held. They were still here, tethered to the earth by the bonds I had helped to restore. They were not gone, and yet, I could sense that the battle wasn't over. The forest had receded, but it was only a temporary victory. The darkness still lurked, an ever-present threat in the back of my mind. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, grounding myself in the stillness. For the first time since I had stepped into the forest, I wasn't sure where to go next. The path ahead was unclear, and for the first time I wasn't sure if there even was a path. What had I truly won? The forest was still here. It had changed, yes, but it hadn't disappeared. The shadows that had haunted me weren't gone. They were waiting for me to falter, to lose my connection to the memories, to forget again. The hunger would always be there, lurking. I felt a shift in the air, and a figure stepped from the trees, tall, cloaked in shadow, their face obscured by the hood. The figure moved with an eerie grace, like a presence that had always been there, woven into the very fabric of the forest. There was something about them, something familiar, but it was more a feeling than a memory. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively tightened my grip on the pendant. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sharp, but it was hard to mask the uncertainty that had crept in again. The figure didn't respond at first, but the shadows around us seemed to shift in time with their movements, a subtle pulse of darkness that made the air feel thick, oppressive once again. "I am the one who has always been here," the figure said, their voice a soft murmur, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. "I am the keeper of the forest." I didn't step back, but a shiver ran through me. The words rang with a strange authority, a sense of ancient power. The keeper of the forest? The figure tilted their head, their eyes glowing faintly from within the hood. "The forest is not just a place," they continued. "It is a force of both creation and destruction, born of memory, of loss. But it is not only your memories that it craves." The shadows twisted around them, as though responding to the figure's words, but they didn't move closer. Instead, they parted, revealing the path behind them, a narrow trail that led deeper into the heart of the forest. The same trail I had followed when I first entered this place. The trail I had tried to escape from. "You have learned much," the figure said, their voice growing softer, more melodic. "But what you have not yet learned is this. The forest will never leave you. Not until you have understood its true purpose. You will never be free, not truly." My breath caught in my throat. I had been so focused on defeating the forest, on pushing it back, that I hadn't stopped to truly understand it. The woman's words came back to me. The forest is a reflection of everything that has been lost, but it is also a part of the world. It feeds on what is forgotten, but it is also a force of creation. The forest wasn't simply something to fight. It was something to understand, to coexist with, a mirror of the very things that shaped us. I took a step forward, my voice trembling slightly. "What is it you want?" The keeper's form shimmered, the shadows shifting around them like liquid. Their eyes, those faint, glowing orbs, seemed to pierce through me, seeing beyond my surface, into the very heart of who I was. "I want you to remember," they said softly. "Remember not only what you have lost, but what you have gained in that loss. The forest feeds on forgetting, on grief, on pain. But it also gives. It gives you the chance to grow, to transform, to create something new from the remnants of what has been taken." The shadows writhed, but now they felt different. Less like an enemy and more like a potential ally, a force of nature that could be harnessed if understood, if accepted. I stared at the keeper, still struggling to process their words. You're saying the forest, the darkness, it's not just about destruction. It's about what comes after. It's about what we make of what's been lost. The keeper nodded, the shadows around them rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Exactly. The forest is not only a thief. It is also a creator. Takes, but it also gives. It challenges you, forces you to face your deepest fears, your darkest memories. But from that confrontation, you are reborn. You are remade. You choose what to take from it, what to leave behind. The ground beneath me trembled again, but this time, the trembling felt different. It was not the same hungry pulse I had felt before, the pulse of the forest's hunger. This was a rhythmic, steady beat, a heartbeat. Will you fight the forest forever? The keeper asked, their voice a soft whisper now, full of something like pity. Or will you learn to live with it? Will you learn to walk alongside it? I didn't have an answer. The weight of their words pressed down on me, forcing me to confront everything I had been running from. The forest was not just a monster to be slain. It was part of the world, part of me. It was a force that could not be defeated, not in the way I had imagined. Could only be understood, shaped, lived with. I took a deep breath, the realization settling like a stone in my chest. I don't know if I can accept it, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. How can I live with something that takes so much? The keeper's form shimmered, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something. Something like a smile, though it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. You already are, they said, their voice barely more than a breath. You've already started. And with that, the figure stepped back into the shadows, disappearing from sight. The air grew still again, the tension dissipating, but the clearing felt different now. Felt complete. The shadows no longer felt like enemies. They were a part of the world, part of me, and in facing them, I had begun to understand what the forest was trying to teach me. Not through battle, but through remembrance, through acceptance. The forest was waiting, but it wasn't just waiting to consume me. It was waiting for me to learn how to live with it, to walk its path without fear. And I was ready to begin that journey. The forest felt different now. The air was still, not oppressive, but heavy with something new. The shadows that had once been the forest's teeth, its claws, now seemed more like companions, lurking in the periphery, waiting to be understood. There was no longer a frantic sense of urgency, no desperate struggle to push them away. Instead, the forest felt like a place of potential, an unknown landscape, waiting for me to explore it, to walk through it not as a wanderer lost and desperate, but as someone who had found the courage to face what lay within. The keeper's words echoed in my mind. Will you live with the forest, or will you fight it forever? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been running for so long, trying to escape something I wasn't ready to face. The darkness, the forest, had always been there, in the corners of my thoughts, lurking at the edges of my memory. But it wasn't just an enemy. It wasn't just a force of destruction. It was part of me, part of the world. And in learning to live with it, I would have to face more than just the shadows. I would have to face myself. I took another slow breath, feeling the weight of the forest around me. The pendant, still hanging from my neck, pulsed with a faint warmth, as though in response to my thoughts. It was no longer the blinding light it had once been, but it had become something more subtle, something deeper, more ingrained into my very being. It was a part of me now, just as the forest was. The lost souls, those I had called back, were still with me, though their forms were now fainter. They lingered at the edges of the clearing, watching me with their soft, distant gazes. I didn't know what to say to them, what to do. They had returned, but their presence was not like a victory. It was more like a quiet understanding, a shared bond between us all. They were part of the forest too, just as much as the shadows. I looked up at the trees around me. The black glass trunks shimmered with the faintest glow, a reflection of the light from the pendant, but the forest was still alive. The pulse beneath the earth had slowed, but it had not disappeared. The shadows were not gone. They were simply waiting. I felt a sudden, almost overwhelming pull to walk deeper into the forest, to follow that path the keeper had shown me. I wasn't sure why, but something in me knew that the answers I sought lay ahead. Not in the clearing, but in the heart of the forest. The keeper had said it before. The forest will never leave you, not truly. And so, I would have to confront it once again. But this time, I would not be running. With a deep breath, I stepped forward. The path was narrow, winding through the glass-like trees, their jagged branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The shadows seemed to move with me, stretching out across the path, folding in on themselves, as if they were aware of my presence, aware of my intention to move deeper into their world. I didn't stop, couldn't. The deeper I walked, the heavier the air became, but the tension was different now. It wasn't the suffocating pressure I had felt before. It was more like a slow, measured pulse, the heartbeat of the forest. The trees stretched higher above me, their dark trunks twisting into strange, angular shapes, like reflections of my own thoughts, warped and stretched by the weight of memory. I stopped for a moment, unsure of where the path would take me. The light from the pendant flickered again, but this time it wasn't just the faint glow I had come to rely on. It was something more, something warmer. There was no denying it now. The forest had changed me, and in return I was changing the forest. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the forest fill my senses. The rustling of the leaves, the soft crunch of my feet on the glass shards beneath me. It was a symphony of quiet, of stillness. There was no rush,
No urgency.
and then, from the distance, I heard a voice. It was faint at first, a whisper on the wind, like a memory just out of reach. It wasn't the keeper's voice, but it was familiar. It was one of the lost souls. I knew that much instinctively. I followed the sound, my steps slow and deliberate. The shadows around me seemed to stretch in response, almost as if they were guiding me, pulling me forward. And then I saw her. She was standing in a clearing ahead, her form barely visible against the black trees. Her figure was faint, translucent, her edges blurred like the mist that clung to the ground. It was her, one of the lost souls I had called back. I recognized her face now, the gentle curve of her features, the soft eyes that seemed to hold an entire universe of emotions. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile of triumph or relief. It was a smile that carried the weight of the forest, of the memories she had left behind, of the things she had learned. "You've come," she said softly, her voice like the rustle of leaves in a storm. It was a voice that seemed to echo from somewhere far away, but it held a certain clarity, a sense of purpose that resonated deep within me. I started to speak, but the words didn't come. There was something about her presence, something about the way she stood in the clearing, that made everything feel simultaneously urgent and unnecessary. As though all the questions I had ever asked were already answered, but I hadn't yet learned how to listen. "You are the one who remembers," she said, her gaze never leaving mine. "The one who faces the forest. But there is more you must understand." I stepped forward, hesitant but compelled. "What is it I need to understand?" Her eyes met mine, and I felt the weight of the world in that gaze. It was like she could see everything inside me, every fear, every doubt, every piece of myself that I had hidden away. "The forest is not just a place," she said, her voice softer now like a prayer. "It is a part of you, part of all of us. It is a reflection of what we have lost, yes, but it is also a reflection of what we have gained, what we create." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't look away. Couldn't. "You cannot fight the forest," she continued, her voice growing quieter, as though she was speaking to herself more than to me. "You can only learn to live with it, to live through it. The forest will never leave you, but neither will the memories you hold." She stepped closer, her form flickering like a mirage. "You must learn to walk in both worlds," she said, "the world of shadows and the world of light, and only then will you truly be free." I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. But before I could ask another question, she was gone, fading into the trees like a wisp of smoke caught on the wind. I stood there, staring into the empty space where she had been, the silence of the forest pressing in around me. There was no more doubt, no more fear. The answers were clear now, though they were not what I had expected. The forest was not something to fight. It was not something to escape. It was a part of me, part of the world, part of the cycle of life. The shadows and the light, they were not separate. They were two sides of the same coin. And to truly live, to truly be free, I would have to learn to walk in both worlds. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The forest, the shadows, the lost souls, they were all a part of this journey, and I was ready to face them. The forest was no longer a place I feared. In fact, fear had become something foreign to me. The weight of the shadows, the suffocating pressure of the trees, no longer felt like threats. Instead, they felt like teachers, quietly urging me to understand, to accept, to become something more. I moved deeper into the forest, not knowing exactly where I was going but trusting that the path would reveal itself. The forest was no longer an enemy I had to escape from, but a world I had to navigate, part of me. And yet, even in this quiet acceptance, I knew the truth. I wasn't fully free. Not yet. The whispers of the lost souls still lingered in the corners of my mind, their soft voices murmuring like distant memories. I could hear them clearly now, their tones filled with sadness, longing, but also something else. Hope. There was a sense of connection, a bond between us. I had helped them find their way back, but in doing so, I had found something of my own. Something I had lost long ago. The pendant around my neck pulsed once more, steady and strong, its glow faint but unwavering. It had become a part of me, woven into the very fabric of this journey. The forest's darkness no longer had the power to swallow it. The pendant was my connection to both light and shadow, to memory and creation. It was both anchor and guide. But I still didn't understand its full purpose. I hadn't yet learned all it had to teach me. I walked for what felt like hours, moving without aim, letting the forest's rhythm guide me. The ground beneath my feet felt solid now, no longer trembling with the restless energy that had once shaken it. But the deeper I ventured, the more I began to feel that I was moving toward something waiting for me at the heart of the forest. A low hum filled the air, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. The shadows shifted, swirling at the edges of the path. I wasn't alone. I could feel the presence of something or someone watching, waiting. It was a feeling that had become familiar now, one I had learned to trust. But this presence felt different. It was closer, more intense. The path ahead opened up into a wide clearing, the trees parting to reveal an expanse of broken glass, shards of obsidian scattered across the ground like shattered stars. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, tall and cloaked in darkness, their face obscured by the same shadow that had haunted the forest from the very beginning. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, a cold, unsettling gaze that seemed to pierce through my soul. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't the keeper. This wasn't one of the lost souls. This was something else entirely. Something ancient. Something powerful. "You have come far?" A voice boomed, rich and deep, vibrating in my chest. It was a voice that filled the clearing, echoing through the trees, reverberating in the very air around me. "But you have not yet come far enough." I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "Who are you?" The words felt weak as soon as they left my mouth. But I had to ask. I had to understand who or what this was. The figure did not respond immediately. Instead, the shadows around it swirled and shifted, forming shapes that flickered in and out of existence, like distorted memories. Faces, forms, fleeting images of people, some familiar, some not. I saw flashes of things I had long since forgotten, things buried deep in my past. The face of my mother, my father, friends from long ago, even the faint outline of the woman who had guided me. The shadows were feeding on them, feeding on the things I had let go. the things I had tried to forget. But now they were all remembered. All of them. And in their faces, I saw something new, something terrifying and beautiful. The shadows weren't just consuming these memories. They were reforming them, reshaping them into something else. Something I couldn't yet understand. The figure's voice, when it came, was both terrifying and mournful. You think you have learned the truth, but you have only scratched the surface. The forest is not just a reflection of your memories. It is a place where all memories, yours, mine, everyone's, converge, become one. You walk this forest because you belong to it. I stepped back, the weight of the words pressing down on me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I don't belong here. I've never belonged here. The figure tilted its head, the shadows around it coiling like serpents. You are wrong. The forest was born of everyone's memories, everyone's pain, everyone's loss. It is not just yours to escape from. It is yours to embrace. You are a part of it, whether you want to be or not. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating in my chest, until it felt as though the very ground beneath me was alive, shifting, twisting, pulling me down. I could feel the shadows reaching for me, curling around my ankles, my legs, like tendrils, trying to pull me into their embrace. The faces flickered again, those I had known, those I had lost, and I could see now what they were becoming. They were becoming me. I stumbled backward, the pull of the shadows growing stronger, but I couldn't move. My feet were stuck in place, my body frozen. No, I cried out. I'm not like them. I'm not a part of this. The figure let out a low, mournful laugh, and the shadows surged forward, wrapping around me, pulling at my chest, at my heart. You are not above the forest, it said, its voice now cold, like the wind before a storm. You are not separate. You are one with it, and one day all that you have lost, everything you have tried to forget, will return to you. It will become you. The shadows will devour you, and you will become the forest. The words were like a knife in my chest. I gasped, trying to fight back, but the shadows pressed harder. I could feel them pulling at my memories, at the edges of my thoughts. The faces of the lost souls, my family, my friends, they were me, and I was them. All of us, tangled together in a web of memory and shadow. I closed my eyes, the world around me spinning, the darkness closing in. And then, something shifted. I didn't know what it was, but I felt a warmth in my chest, a steady light that seemed to burn through the shadows, pushing them back. It was the pendant. I could feel its pulse, steady and strong, a heartbeat of light that was my own. The pendant was not just a source of power. It was a part of me. It was my connection to the light, to the memory of all that had been lost. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the light. The figure hissed, its form flickering and shifting, losing its shape. You think the light will save you? It spat. You think you can resist the forest's pull? The darkness is inevitable. You cannot escape it. But I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I wasn't running from the shadows. I was embracing them. I was learning to live with them. I lifted the pendant higher, feeling its warmth flood through me, mingling with the darkness around me. The shadows recoiled again, but they didn't vanish. They only shifted, and I realized the truth in that moment. The darkness and the light were not enemies. They were parts of the same whole. I was not separate from the forest. I was a part of it, just as it was a part of me. And for the first time, I felt at peace. The figure's form began to dissolve before me, the shadows that had once seemed so solid now flickering and retreating, unable to withstand the light. The pendant pulsed softly in my hand, a steady rhythm that calmed my racing heart. The forest seemed to shift around me, its pulse, its breath, slowing as the darkness receded. But it wasn't gone. I knew that now. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the air lift around me. The ground beneath my feet felt solid again, not trembling with the restless hunger of the forest, but stable, alive in its own strange way. The trees that had once seemed so oppressive now felt like old friends, their jagged glass trunks reflecting the light from the pendant, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had walked into the heart of the forest, faced the shadows, and understood them. They were not my enemies. They were my companions, my memories, the things I had lost and tried to bury. The forest was not just a place of destruction. It was a place of rediscovery, a place where the forgotten could be remembered, where the lost could be found again. And I had learned to live with it, with the light and the dark, with the shadows that had once consumed me, and the memories that had tried to slip through my fingers. I glanced around, wondering if the figure, the one who had called me into the clearing, the one whose voice had boomed through the trees, was still watching, waiting for something. But there was no sign of it, no trace of its presence. The shadows had retreated, leaving behind only silence. The forest had returned to its natural state, not peaceful, not menacing, but alive. A place of quiet movement, of hidden whispers. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. The smell of damp earth, of shattered glass, of something ancient and untamed. It was a scent I had come to know, a scent I had come to embrace. The forest was not my enemy. It was a part of me, and I was a part of it. The lost souls had not left. They were still with me, standing at the edges of the clearing, their faint forms shimmering in the dim light. I could feel them, like echoes of a distant past, lingering in the air. They had come to me for a reason. They had guided me here, but now they were waiting for something else, something I hadn't yet understood. I reached out to them, my hand trembling slightly as I extended it toward the nearest one. The soul, one of the first I had called back, looked up at me, its form flickering, as if caught between two worlds. Its eyes were sad, but there was a softness to them, a quiet recognition. "You've found your way," it whispered, its voice like a breeze through the trees. "You've learned what the forest wants from you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. There were so many questions I still had, so many things I didn't understand. But I felt an odd sense of calm, as if the answers were there, just out of reach, waiting for me to discover them in time. "We are all connected," the soul continued. "The forest, the shadows, the light. It is all one. And now you are a part of it. But there is something else you must remember. Something you've already forgotten." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I had learned so much in this forest, but I still felt like there was something I was missing. Something I had overlooked, something I had yet to grasp. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The soul's form flickered again, its edges blurring in the shifting light. "The forest does not just take. It does not just remember. It gives too, creates. It is the space where everything we've lost can be reborn." I stared at it, confused. "Reborn? How?" The soul's face softened. "You are the one who walked through it, who faced the darkness and the light. But there are others. Others who are lost, who are still trapped in the forest. They need you. They need us. Together, we can help them find their way." I felt the weight of the words settle into me. Others. There were still people out there. Souls who had become lost, souls who hadn't yet found their way out. And the forest, the shadows were not done. They would never be done. They would continue to feed on the forgotten, on the lost, until someone else came to face them. "But I don't know how to help them," I said, my voice thick with doubt. "I barely understand it myself." The soul's form shifted again, its features now barely visible in the dim light. "You've already helped us. You've already begun. The forest is not something to be feared, not something to fight. It is a place of learning, of growth. It holds the key to all that was lost, all that was forgotten. And in helping others, in guiding them, you will find your own path. You will become the light that guides them through the darkness." I took a step back, my heart pounding. The weight of the responsibility, the enormity of what I was being asked to do, hit me all at once. The forest had already taken so much from me. It had torn apart everything I thought I understood. But now it was asking me to give something in return, to be the guide, the beacon, for others who were still trapped within it. "I don't know if I can do it," I whispered, my voice shaking. The The soul's eyes softened, and it reached out to me. Its fingers brushed my arm, and for a brief moment, I felt a warmth, a connection, unlike anything I had ever experienced. The forest had taken so much, but it had given something back in return. Something more than just memories. Something more than just shadows. "You can," the soul said, its voice full of quiet certainty. "You are ready. The forest has chosen you. You will walk the path of shadows and light. You will be the one to guide others home." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of their words settle deep inside me. I had learned so much about the forest, about the shadows, the light, the memories that made up this place, but I had not yet learned what it truly meant to live with it, to be a part of it. But I was ready now. When I opened my eyes again, the soul was gone, fading into the darkness like a wisp of smoke. The clearing was silent once more, but the shadows had shifted. They weren't oppressive anymore. They were like old friends, quietly waiting in the corners of my mind, reminding me that they were always with me, always a part of me. I felt the pulse of the pendant, steady and warm, a quiet heartbeat that seemed to match my own. And in that moment I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The forest had taught me what I needed to learn. And now it was time to share what I had learned with others. It was time to become the guide, the light, for those still lost within the shadows. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid. The path ahead was not clear, but it no longer mattered. I had faced the forest. I had faced the shadows and the light, and I had emerged from it not as a victim, but as something else, something stronger. The pendant around my neck pulsed in time with my heartbeat, steady and unyielding. It was more than a source of light now. It was a part of my essence, a bridge between the realms of memory and the unknown. I had learned to walk the line between the light and the dark, between what was and what could be. But the forest had one more lesson to teach me. As I moved deeper into the heart of the woods, the trees shifted again, their black glass trunks casting jagged shadows across the path. The forest seemed alive, its pulse faint but steady, like the breath of something ancient. The clearing where I had spoken to the lost soul had faded into memory, and the woods felt emptier now, quieter. But that was only the surface. Beneath the stillness, I could feel the forest watching, waiting. It had already shown me its depths, its hunger, its ability to devour what was precious. But now I could feel something else, something far deeper. The forest wasn't just a place of loss. It was a place of rebirth, of creation, of new beginnings. The lost souls I had guided, those I had helped free from the shadows, were still with me. But they were different now. Their forms had grown fainter, less distinct. They no longer lingered at the edges of my vision. They had become part of the forest, just as I had. They were no longer separate from it, but woven into its very fabric, their memories and mine merging into something greater. I stopped for a moment, looking at the shadows around me. The whispers had quieted, but the weight of the forest still pressed in, thick with meaning, thick with the echoes of all that had been. But now I understood. The forest wasn't just a place of death. It was a place of transformation. Every shadow, every piece of shattered glass underfoot, every broken tree was a fragment of something that had once been whole. But it didn't stay broken. The forest held the power to rebuild, to create new life from what had been lost. A shiver ran through me. The forest was always shifting, always changing. But so was I. I took a step forward. The path wound through the trees, leading me toward a deeper part of the forest. The air grew colder, the shadows longer, and I knew that whatever lay ahead would not be easy. But I was ready. I was no longer the person who had stumbled into this place, lost and afraid. I was someone else now, someone who had learned that the forest was not just a place to survive, but a place to grow, to become. The ground beneath me trembled, just slightly. I paused, feeling the vibrations spread through my legs, my body. The forest was alive in ways I hadn't yet begun to understand. It wasn't just the trees, the shadows, the lost souls. It was the very earth itself. The pulse, the rhythm, the heartbeat of the land beneath my feet. It was a part of me now, just as I was a part of it. The pendant in my hand flared with light, a sudden pulse of warmth that spread out from my chest. I looked down at it, surprised. The warmth was deeper now, like a part of my own soul. The shadows around me seemed to shift in response, swirling at the edges of my vision, but they no longer felt threatening. They were familiar, waiting like old friends. Ahead, the path split into two directions. One path led deeper into the forest, where the trees were even darker, their black glass trunks more jagged, their branches reaching out like claws. The other path was quieter, softer, with patches of soft moss and faint beams of light breaking through the canopy above. Both paths seemed to call to me, but for some reason, my feet gravitated toward the darker path, the one that led deeper into the heart of the forest. I walked forward, feeling the shadows wrap around me, not with menace, but with a kind of presence, like the forest was embracing me, inviting me to come closer. The air grew thick with the scent of wet earth, and the distant hum I had heard before grew louder, vibrating in the core of my being. The forest was speaking to me, and now I was ready to listen. The deeper I walked, the more the shadows twisted, swirling in front of me, parting to reveal something new, something alive. There, in the center of a clearing, stood an enormous tree. Its trunk was black like obsidian, but it was different from the others. It pulsed with energy, a faint, eerie glow coming from within its bark. The branches were long and twisted, stretching up toward the sky, each one adorned with what looked like shimmering glass leaves. The tree was ancient, older than any tree I had ever seen, its roots stretching deep into the earth. This tree was the heart of the forest. I approached slowly, drawn in by its presence. The hum in the air intensified, filling my head, my chest. It was like the tree was alive, its pulse syncing with my own. The pendant glowed brighter, the light flickering in time with the tree's pulse. As I drew closer, I saw that the tree's bark wasn't solid. It shimmered, like glass, revealing glimpses of images, memories, I realized. Faces, scenes, flashes of lives lived and lost, swirling in the tree's core. Each image was a piece of the forest, a piece of the darkness that had consumed it. But they weren't just memories. They were new. The tree wasn't just holding the past. It was creating the future. The shadows whispered, not in fear, but in reverence. I could feel them around me, circling the clearing like a dark mist, watching the tree, watching me. They were waiting for something. I reached out a hand toward the tree. The moment my fingers touched the bark, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The hum grew louder, the vibrations shaking the very ground beneath me. And then, I felt it. A surge of power, a rush of memories, of lost souls, of everything the forest had taken and given. It was overwhelming. A flood of images, emotions, lives, memories, all pouring into me. I could see the faces of the lost souls I had helped, their eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. I could see flashes of my own past, moments I had long forgotten, things I had buried deep in my memory. And beyond that, I saw faces I didn't recognize, lost souls who had never been found, trapped in the forest, waiting for someone to guide them, waiting for me. The tree's pulse grew faster, louder, until it was almost deafening. The shadows that had once been so menacing now seemed to swirl around me, not with malice, but with a sense of purpose. They were part of the process, part of the forest's endless cycle of destruction and rebirth. And then I understood. The forest didn't just consume souls. It didn't just feed on the forgotten. It created. It brought memories to life, reshaped the broken into something new. The tree was the heart of the forest, the place where all that had been lost could be reborn. But it wasn't enough to just witness it. I had to be part of it. The forest had chosen me to guide those who were still lost, to help them find their way, just as I had found my own. I stepped back from the tree, my heart racing. The light from the pendant dimmed slightly, but the warmth remained, spreading out from my chest, filling me with a deep sense of understanding. The shadows seemed to retreat, swirling back into the trees, but they didn't disappear. They were still there, a part of the forest, a part of me. And the tree, this ancient, living thing, stood as the center of it all, the place where the cycles of life and death intertwined. I wasn't just walking through the forest anymore. I was becoming a part of it. And the journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The forest, in all its eerie stillness, now seemed to hum with a new kind of energy. The shadows that had once threatened to overwhelm me now curled around the trunks of the trees like familiar companions. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, of age-old memories, of the power that thrummed beneath the surface of everything. The forest, the tree, the very ground beneath my feet. Everything was connected, and I could feel that connection deep within me, coursing through my veins like the pulse of the pendant that hung against my chest. I stepped back from the ancient tree, but its presence lingered, filling the clearing with a quiet, steady thrum. I realized then that this tree was not just a singular entity. It was the heart of the forest, but it was also its memory, its soul. It held the past, the present, and the future within its branches, within the endless spiral of its roots. And somehow I was becoming part of it. I closed my eyes and took a slow, steadying breath, feeling the vibrations in the air as they resonated through me. The warmth of the pendant spread outward, filling the emptiness I hadn't even realized was there. I had been so focused on surviving the forest, on escaping the darkness, that I hadn't seen how much it had changed me. The shadows had not consumed me. They had shaped me, and in return I had learned to shape the forest. But that wasn't all. The whispers were growing louder now, not in the distance, but around me. Closer, as though the very trees were speaking. I turned slowly, looking for the source, and that's when I saw them. They were standing just at the edge of the clearing, barely visible at first, faint, almost indistinct figures, like the mist that clung to the earth. But as they stepped closer, I could see them more clearly. These weren't the lost souls I had helped before, nor were they the ominous, shadowy creatures that had once stalked me. These were new, different, and they were looking at me, waiting. Their faces were blurred, their features shifting and changing with each passing moment, but their eyes, they were the same. Those eyes, filled with that same ancient longing, the same sadness, the same need. I felt the pulse of the pendant quicken in response. They were here because of me. I had guided the lost souls, helped them find their way. But now it seemed the forest had sent more. The whispers had led me here, to the heart of the forest, to the place where rebirth began. And these souls, they were waiting for me, just as I had once waited for the keeper. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure what to do. The tree's pulse had slowed, as if it were waiting too. The shadows around me stretched and moved, not threatening, but watchful. I understood then that the forest was asking something of me, something more than I had ever realized. I was not just a wanderer. I was not just someone who had survived its trials. I was becoming a part of its very cycle. The first figure stepped forward, its face flickering like a flame caught in the wind. It was a woman, or at least I thought it was. Her form seemed to shimmer, constantly shifting, but her eyes, they were clear, fixed on me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. There was no fear in her gaze, no desperation, just something deeper, something that reached into the very core of my being. "You've come," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet it rang through the stillness of the forest like a bell. "You've walked the path, but now you must guide us." Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with their weight. Guide? I had only just found my way, and now the forest was asking me to do what I had done for myself for others, to help them find their path, their place within this dark, shifting world. But I knew what she meant. I knew it with a certainty that cut through the fog of uncertainty in my mind. The forest, the tree, the shadows, they were not enemies. They were not forces to be conquered. They were part of the world, and in embracing them, I had become something new. And now, these souls, they were lost just as I had once been. They needed the same thing I had needed, guidance. Not to escape, but to embrace the shadows, to walk with them, not against them. I looked back at the tree, its branches now swaying in the wind, the glass-like leaves shimmering in the pale light. It seemed to beckon me, as though it knew what I had yet to realize, that this wasn't just about surviving the forest anymore. It was about understanding it, about helping others see it the way I now did. "Will you help us?" The woman's voice whispered again, and this time, there was no hesitation in my heart. I knew my answer. "I will." And just like that, the forest seemed to exhale, the shadows drawing back as if in approval. The woman's form flickered once more, her features clearing for a brief moment, and I saw her face clearly for the first time. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her. There was a softness to her, a quiet sadness in her eyes that I couldn't shake. But beneath that sadness was something more, something hopeful. She smiled, though it was a smile that carried the weight of the forest's timeless sorrow. "Thank you," she said, her voice a soft rustle like leaves in the wind. "The forest is not just a place of death. It is a place of rebirth, and you have found the key to its heart. Now you must help us unlock it." The other figures around her stepped forward as well, their forms flickering in and out of focus, like lost memories. They too had been waiting. They too had been drawn to the heart of the forest, to the tree that held the power to transform what had been lost. I nodded, feeling a strange warmth settle within me. I had not come this far to turn back. The forest had already changed me. But now I realized it was not just about my own transformation. It was about helping these souls find their way, guiding them through the same shadows that had once consumed me, helping them see the light that lay hidden within the darkness. "I'll guide you," I said, my voice steady, but with a newfound certainty. "We'll walk together, through the darkness, into the light." And with those words, the shadows parted further, revealing the path ahead. The whispers quieted, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. I felt the pendant pulse again, this time stronger, more resolute. I wasn't just walking the path for myself anymore. I was walking it for all those who had been lost, all those who still needed to find their way. The souls, those who had come before me, those who had been trapped in the forest, were no longer just wandering figures. They were not mere echoes of the past. They were waiting, hoping, longing for the same thing I had found. A way forward, a way to live with the shadows, not fight them. A way to remember and create anew. And now I was the guide. I was the one who would walk with them through the dark, who would show them that the forest, with all its mysteries and dangers, was not something to fear. It was something to embrace. I turned to the figures gathered around me, their forms flickering like the last remnants of a dream. "Let's go," I said quietly. "Together." And as we began to walk, the forest seemed to open up before us, not as a place of darkness, but as a space of endless possibility. The shadows, once so heavy, now felt lighter. The path ahead was unknown, but I no longer feared it. We walked, together, into the unknown, into the heart of the forest. The path ahead seemed endless, stretching deep into the heart of the forest. The trees, tall and dark like obsidian sentinels, towered above me, their twisted branches reaching out like arms, beckoning us forward. The lost souls, those who had joined me, their forms flickering in and out of existence, walked beside me, their silent presence like a quiet murmur in the air. There was no longer fear in their eyes. The shadows that had once clung to them like a heavy cloak now seemed less oppressive. They walked with purpose, as though they had finally found their place in the forest. And I walked with them, not as their savior, not as a beacon of light, but as someone who had simply understood. The forest was no longer a dark and twisted place of terror. It was a place of life, of growth. A place where memories could be reborn, where the lost could find their way. The very soil beneath my feet felt alive, pulsating with a kind of energy I had never known. Every step I took was an affirmation of the connection I now shared with this place. I was no longer a wanderer. I was home. But as we walked deeper into the forest, I could feel something stirring at the edges of my consciousness. It was subtle at first, just a fleeting sensation, like a shadow brushing against the back of my mind. But it grew stronger with every step, like the forest itself was watching us. I glanced over my shoulder, but the souls behind me remained silent, their faces distant, absorbed in their own thoughts. They were still following, still walking in the quiet rhythm of the forest, but there was a tension in the air now. Something had changed. The trees seemed to press closer, their dark branches intertwining, casting long shadows that curled at the edges of the path. The whispering winds, once soft and comforting, now carried an edge to them, sharp, urgent, like a warning. I stopped in my tracks, sensing the shift. The air felt heavier now, thick with an unfamiliar weight. The shadows that clung to the trunks of the trees seemed to grow more defined, as though something was pushing against them, fighting to break free. The whispers were louder now, but not the soft, comforting whispers of the lost souls. These were different, more distorted, more hungry. I turned to the souls behind me. "Do you feel it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, unsure if they could sense what I was feeling. The first soul, the woman who had spoken to me earlier, stepped forward. Her form flickered briefly before she steadied herself. Her face was no longer shifting. It was clearer now, more solid. Her eyes, though, remained shadowed, as though something was obscuring her thoughts. "Yes," she said, her voice low, like the rustle of dry leaves. "The forest, it's changing." The other souls murmured in agreement, their forms shifting uneasily. I could sense their fear, but it wasn't the kind of fear I had once known. This was something deeper, something primal. "Something's coming," one of the souls said, his voice tinged with desperation. "Something wrong." I looked around, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees had grown darker, the shadows stretching unnaturally long, as though the forest was being consumed from within. The ground beneath my feet trembled, a low vibration that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. The whispers grew louder, no longer words of memory or longing, but voices of hunger. I could feel them, pressing against my thoughts, filling my mind with a sense of dread I hadn't felt since my first steps into the forest. I took a step back, my hand instinctively moving to the pendant around my neck. The warmth of its light, once a steady presence, now flickered uncertainly, as though it too sensed the disturbance. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice cracking with the realization that the calm I had felt before was slipping away. The woman who had spoken earlier, her form clearer now than before, stepped toward me, her eyes filled with a strange sadness. "There are things in this forest," she whispered. "Things that were never meant to be disturbed. The shadows that consume souls. They are not the only thing that dwells here. There are others. Things that are older than even the forest itself." A chill ran through me, and I turned to face the path ahead, unsure of what to expect. The forest felt alive in a way it had never felt before. It was no longer just a place of shadows and memories. There was something darker, something more ancient that lurked within it. Something that was beginning to stir. "The tree," I whispered. The ancient tree at the heart of the forest, the source of the forest's power, was silent now. I hadn't thought of it in a while, but something about the way the forest was changing made me feel like it was connected to this disturbance. That the balance I had so carefully come to understand was being undone. The woman nodded, her form flickering with unease. "The tree is the heart of the forest. But it is not the only heart. There are other forces at play here, forces that feed on fear, on corruption. And they are waking." I turned to look at her. Her face was serious now, no longer shifting like it had before. She was focused, her eyes narrowed as though she could see something I couldn't. The rest of the souls had fallen silent, their once erratic movements now frozen in place. "We have to go back," the woman said, her voice tense. "We have to reach the tree before they—" But before she could finish, the earth beneath us rumbled, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the forest. The shadows around us swirled and writhed, as though something was forcing its way through them, pushing them aside to make way for something far darker, far older. The trees groaned, their branches snapping and bending under the strain. And then, from deep within the forest, came a low, guttural growl, a sound that filled the air with dread. I turned, my heart racing in my chest. The shadows were closing in, moving faster now, more aggressive, more alive. There was no time. The balance I had so carefully embraced was unraveling before my eyes, and I had no idea how to stop it. "Run," I gasped, my voice hoarse with panic. "We have to get to the tree. Now." The souls moved without hesitation, but I could feel their fear, thick, suffocating, clinging to them like a second skin. The whispers were now screams, the shadows like tendrils reaching for us, pulling at our limbs, at our minds. The path ahead, once clear, was now filled with writhing darkness. The very air seemed to press down on us, thick and suffocating. But we had no choice. We ran. The forest seemed to close in around us, the branches of the trees snapping like bone, the earth shaking beneath our feet. The shadows stretched and coiled, becoming more solid, more real. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the forest itself was calling out for something, or someone. We reached the clearing in front of the ancient tree, but it was not as I remembered it. The once radiant glow from the tree's bark had dimmed, and its roots, long, twisted things that seemed to pulse with ancient power, were now crawling across the ground, as though they were alive. The woman, her face now set in determination, stepped forward. "The heart of the forest is corrupted," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "The tree must be healed, or the forest will consume everything." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking into me. The forest was dying. The shadows were devouring it from within. And unless we did something, it would take everything with it. The pendant around my neck pulsed once more, brighter now, a beacon in the chaos. I closed my eyes, reaching out to the tree, willing its power to flow through me. But the shadows, thick and hungry, pushed against it, trying to swallow the light. I couldn't stop it alone. Not this time. And so I reached out to the souls around me. They had come to me for guidance, and now it was my turn to guide them. We were one with the forest. And if it was to survive, if the cycle was to continue, we would have to heal it together. "We can do this," I said, my voice shaking with fear, but steady in its resolve. "We can save the forest. Together." And as we stood before the ancient tree, our hands extended toward it, the darkness swirling around us, I knew this was the moment that would decide everything. Would we save the forest, or would we be consumed by it? The air was thick with tension. The shadows, once just an ever-present part of the forest, now felt like a living thing, an entity all its own, hungry, pulling at us, suffocating the light. The ancient tree before us, the heart of the forest, pulsed weakly. Its roots twisted and snapped as though in agony, and its once shimmering bark was now cracked, darkened, as if something deep within it had been corrupted. I could feel the darkness pushing in from all sides. It wasn't just the forest that was changing, it was us, too. The whispers had turned into howls, cries of anguish that reverberated through the air, scratching at the edges of my mind. The souls around me, though still present, now seemed more distant, flickering like dying embers. They were afraid, their forms unstable, as though the very forest itself was attempting to tear them apart. We were running out of time. The woman who had guided me so far stepped forward, her eyes dark and filled with something like sorrow. Her voice, when she spoke, was tight, strained. "The shadows, they're not just consuming the forest. They are trying to possess it. The heart, the tree, it's the source of everything here. Without it, the forest will die. And if the forest dies, everything it has taken will be lost. The memories, the souls, us." Her words cut through me sharper than any blade. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just about saving the forest. It was about saving us, the souls who had come here, the memories that had been woven into the very fabric of the forest. If the corruption reached the heart of the forest, we would all be consumed by it. Forgotten, erased, forever. I turned to the others, my heart pounding. They were all watching me now, their forms flickering, unstable. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice shaky with the weight of everything I had learned. The woman didn't answer at first. She was staring at the tree, her face pale, her eyes narrowing as she seemed to listen to the whispers swirling around us. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but determined. "We have to reach the core of the tree, the source of its power. Only there can we stop it from falling." I nodded, understanding. But how could we reach the core? The shadows that surrounded us were thick, heavy, alive with a malevolent force that pushed against us. Every step I took, every movement, felt as if I was wading through the darkness itself. The forest was no longer a place of rebirth. It was a battleground, and the longer we stood here, the more the shadows closed in around us. The pendant around my neck pulsed once more, its light flickering like a dying flame. I placed my hand over it, feeling its warmth, its power. It had guided me this far, but now I wasn't sure if it could help us. The darkness around us felt too strong, too all-encompassing. I looked up at the tree again, its branches reaching toward the sky like twisted fingers, its roots clawing at the earth. It was the heart of the forest, the source of its power. But if it fell, if it was consumed, then there would be no forest left to save. No shadows, no memories, no rebirth. Only emptiness. There has to be a way, I murmured, more to myself than to anyone else. The woman's eyes flickered toward me, a spark of something, hope, or perhaps desperation, flaring in her gaze. "The pendant you carry," she said quietly, "it is tied to the heart of the forest. It is why you were brought here. The light you carry. It is the only thing that can push back the darkness. But it is not enough to just shine. You must anchor it, center it in the core of the tree. Only then can you heal what has been corrupted." My breath caught in my throat. "Anchor it," she nodded. "The pendant is the light, but it is not the key. You are." I shook my head, my mind racing. "I don't understand. How can I be the key? I'm just a person. I'm not." "You are part of the forest now," she interrupted, her voice steady. "The forest has chosen you. The shadows, the light, the memory. It is all bound to you. And it is through you that the balance can be restored." The weight of her words pressed down on me, suffocating. I felt it then, a sharp tug at the edges of my consciousness, a pull toward the tree. The pendant vibrated beneath my fingers, its warmth becoming almost painful as it seemed to call to me, urging me forward. I turned to the others, to the souls who had come with me on this journey. Their faces, once distant, now seemed more present, like the fog was beginning to clear from around them. They were with me. I could feel it. We were part of this. The forest, the shadows, the memories, it was all connected. And if I failed, we would all be lost. I stepped toward the tree, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows, sensing my movement, surged toward me, but I didn't stop. I reached out with my hand, feeling the pull of the pendant in my chest, guiding me. The shadows recoiled, as if repelled by the light, but they didn't retreat completely. They were closing in again, more ferociously than before. I took another step forward, and the darkness twisted around me, trying to drown out the light. But something was changing. The pendant grew brighter, its warmth flooding through my body, radiating outward. I could feel the light reaching for the tree, the ancient heart of the forest. The shadows screamed, shrieking in fury, but the light pressed on, relentless, pushing back the darkness that had once ruled this place. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, the air growing thick with energy. I could hear the whispers, the cries, the memories of those who had been lost. But now they were not in pain. They were calling out, encouraging me. I reached the tree, my hand outstretched. The shadows still writhed around me, but I didn't falter. I placed my palm against the bark of the tree, and at that moment, the pendant flared to life, its light cutting through the darkness like a blade. The shadows recoiled, howling in rage, but they couldn't stop the light. The tree trembled, the darkness within it fighting against the light, but the pull of the pendant, the power of the connection I now shared with the forest, was too strong. Slowly, the cracks in the tree's bark began to heal, the dark veins retreating like worms from the sun. The light grew stronger, flooding the clearing with a warmth that I had never known before. The shadows continued to fight, but now they were weakening. The air began to clear, the oppressive weight lifting from my chest. And then, a sound, a deep, resonant hum, filled the air. The sound of the tree breathing, of the forest coming back to life. I closed my eyes, focusing on the light, on the connection. The whispers faded, replaced by a sense of peace, of calm. The forest was healing. The shadows were not gone, but they no longer held the same power over us. They were a part of the forest just as the light was. Both would coexist, neither overtaking the other, but finding balance in each other. The air around us seemed to lighten, and when I opened my eyes, the tree was whole again. Its bark was now a deep, rich brown, smooth and solid, with veins of light running through it like veins of gold. The roots, once twisted and gnarled, now grew straight, reaching deep into the earth, pulling life back into the soil. And the forest? It was no longer a place of corruption, but a place of rebirth. The souls around me stood still, their forms now clear and solid. The woman, the first soul to speak, looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did it," she said, her voice quiet but filled with awe. "You've saved us." I looked at the tree, feeling a deep sense of peace settle in my chest. The forest had been saved, but so had I. The journey wasn't over. There would always be darkness and light, shadows and memories. But now I knew how to walk with them. And in that balance there was hope. The forest was calm now. The once oppressive shadows had receded, no longer clinging to every tree, every rock, every crevice. The light that poured from the ancient tree's heart filled the clearing with warmth, as if the very soul of the forest had breathed a sigh of relief. The air, heavy with the weight of forgotten memories, now felt lighter. The whispers had softened to a gentle murmur, like the wind brushing through the leaves, no longer harsh or desperate. I stood at the foot of the tree, the pendant still glowing softly at my chest, its light steady and unyielding. My hand rested against the tree's smooth bark, feeling its pulse beneath my fingers. It was different now, whole again, its heart no longer tainted by corruption. The forest itself felt alive, renewed, as though it had shaken off a great burden. The souls who had walked with me stood in a circle around the tree, their forms now stable, no longer flickering or unstable. They were no longer lost. They were at peace. They had been freed from the shadows that had bound them, and in doing so, they had helped heal the forest. We had all played a part, and now we stood together in the quiet aftermath of the storm. The woman who had spoken to me earlier, the first of the lost souls, stepped forward. Her features were no longer shifting, no longer distant. She was solid, real, as though she had been reborn with the forest itself. Her eyes were no longer clouded with sorrow, but filled with an expression I could only describe as gratitude. She smiled, though it was a quiet smile, one that held more meaning than words could express. "You've done it," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "You saved the forest, and in doing so, you saved us. You've given us peace." I nodded, though I didn't quite know how to respond. There were no words that could encompass what had happened here, what had been accomplished. I had walked through the darkness, had been lost in the shadows, but I had emerged from it not just as a survivor, but as a part of the forest itself. The pendant, the light, the tree, it all felt like a part of me now. It had always been connected to me, even before I understood it. "What happens now?" I asked, glancing around at the souls who had gathered around the tree, their faces filled with a quiet, resigned calm. They, too, had found their place in this renewed world. The woman's smile faded slightly, but it wasn't sad. "Now we go where we belong," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "We have found our peace. We will return to the forest's memory, to become a part of its cycle once more." I didn't fully understand, but I didn't need to. There was a finality in her words, a sense of completion. They had found their place, and now they would merge with the forest, becoming part of the living, breathing entity that it was. Their souls would live on, not lost to the shadows, but woven into the fabric of the forest itself. One by one, the souls began to step back, their forms glowing faintly as they merged with the forest, their essence becoming one with the trees, the roots, the soil. The woman was the last to go, her eyes meeting mine one final time. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with both sorrow and joy, "for giving us the chance to be whole again." With that, she stepped into the shadows, and she, too, became a part of the forest. The last trace of her faded into the night, leaving only the soft rustle of the leaves as her memory joined the others, etched into the heart of the trees. I stood in silence for a long while, feeling the presence of the souls still lingering around me, now just whispers in the wind. The forest had returned to its natural rhythm, but it was different now. The darkness, the shadows, they were not gone. But they no longer had the power to consume. They were part of the forest, a part of the cycle of life and death, light and shadow. And so was I. The pendant around my neck dimmed slightly, its light no longer as bright as it had been in the chaos of the forest's corruption, but still steady, a reminder of what had been accomplished. I reached up and touched it, feeling its warmth, the connection between it and the forest. It had guided me, and in turn, I had helped guide it back to its balance. I had become a part of this place, just as the souls had, just as the shadows and the light had. We were all woven together in a web of memory and rebirth. I turned away from the tree and looked out into the forest. The path ahead was clear now, the way forward no longer obscured by the weight of fear or uncertainty. I had walked through the darkness and emerged into the light. And in doing so, I had found not just my way through the forest, but my place in it. I wasn't a wanderer anymore. I wasn't just passing through. I had become a part of this world, a part of the cycle that it represented. And that was enough. As I walked away from the clearing, the forest seemed to open up before me. The trees, the shadows, the light, they were all around me, but they no longer felt threatening. They were part of me, and I was part of them. The journey had been long, and the road ahead would not be easy. There would always be shadows in the forest, always memories to be healed, always souls to guide. But I was no longer afraid. The forest had shown me that there was strength in the shadows, and peace in the light, and that, in the end, it was all part of the same cycle, forever changing, forever reborn. The path ahead was long, but it was mine to walk. And so, I stepped forward, ready for whatever the forest had in store for me next. The shadows would always be there, lurking at the edges of my vision, but now I knew how to walk with them. I knew how to embrace them without fear, without the need to run. I had found the balance, and with it I had found peace. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling, a quiet return to normalcy, though I knew that no such thing existed in a place like this. The forest was no longer a place of fear, but it was also never quite the same. It was no longer just a forest. It was a living, breathing entity, full of memories and whispers, life and death, shadows and light, and I had become a part of it. As I walked through the trees, I felt it now, not as a stranger or an outsider, but as a part of the fabric that wove the forest together. The wind carried the voices of the souls, faint and distant, like the rustling of leaves, but their presence was no longer an echo. They were here with me always, in the breeze, in the shadows, in the rustling of the underbrush. The forest had found its balance again, but it would never be completely still. It was alive, constantly changing, shifting between light and darkness, memory and forgetting. And so, too, was I. I stopped by a small stream, the water glimmering in the soft light that now filtered through the trees. I knelt, watching the water ripple and break against the smooth stones, the sound soothing in the otherwise quiet forest. A sense of calm washed over me, as if the forest was breathing in time with me, at peace, at rest. But deep within me, I knew the peace was fragile. The balance was delicate. The shadows that had once threatened to consume us still lingered in the depths of the forest, waiting. But they were no longer a threat. They were a part of the cycle, a reminder that even in the darkest corners, there could be light. I ran my fingers through the water, feeling its coolness, and in that moment, I realized something. The forest wasn't just a place. It wasn't just shadows or trees or spirits. It was a reflection of everything that I had gone through, everything I had become. I wasn't just walking through it anymore. I was living within it, part of its endless cycle. The memories of the souls who had crossed my path, their stories now interwoven with mine, lingered in the air like a quiet song. They were no longer lost. They were a part of the forest's breath, its pulse. And with each breath, with each step, I became more a part of them. The light from the pendant, which had once burned so bright, now settled into a soft, steady glow, like the last embers of a fire that would never truly die. It no longer called to me as urgently as it once had. Its purpose had been fulfilled. The balance had been restored. As I stood from the stream and began walking again, I felt something in the air. It was subtle at first, just a flicker at the edges of my perception. But then it grew stronger, a presence, a familiar energy that seemed to envelop me, pulling me toward the center of the forest. I hesitated, knowing what this was. The call was unmistakable. I followed the pull, my feet moving of their own accord, guided by some force I didn't fully understand but knew I had to answer. The forest, with its endless winding paths and silent watchfulness, opened up before me, the shadows parting as if to make way for me. The path ahead was clear. I didn't need to ask myself why I was being drawn there. I knew. I had walked this path before and I would walk it again. The ancient tree, the heart of the forest, stood at its center, the towering roots reaching deep into the earth, the branches stretching toward the sky. But this time it was different. The air around the tree was heavy with power. But this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was a force of peace, of completion. The tree's bark shimmered faintly, a soft glow emanating from within, pulsing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I could feel the life of the forest around me, the memories of the souls who had passed through, the balance of shadow and light, of death and rebirth. I stepped closer to the tree, my fingers brushing against the smooth bark. The energy that flowed from it was familiar, like a long-lost friend. The pendant around my neck pulsed once more, its light now in perfect harmony with the tree's glow. The shadows that had once threatened to engulf us were now just a part of the forest's life, like the leaves falling in autumn, giving way to new growth. The tree was whole again. And as I stood there, I realized something else, that my journey was over. Not in the sense of an ending, but in the sense of a beginning. I had walked through the darkness and emerged into the light, just as the forest had. But this wasn't just the end of my journey. It was the beginning of something new, something eternal. The souls who had once wandered the forest, lost and trapped in the shadows, had found their place. They had become part of the forest's living memory, woven into its very fabric. The forest was no longer a place of fear or corruption. It was a place of life, of rebirth. It would continue to grow, to evolve just as I had. And so, I knew I had to let go. I turned away from the tree, my heart heavy with the understanding that this was my final step. The forest had given me everything I needed: purpose, understanding, peace. I was no longer a wanderer, no longer lost in the shadows. I was home. I could feel the presence of the souls around me, even if they were no longer visible. They were there, in the air, in the trees, in the very ground beneath my feet. They had become a part of the forest, and the forest had become a part of me. I walked away from the heart of the forest, but I knew it was not a goodbye. It was a promise that I would carry this peace, this balance, with me wherever I went. I would walk with the shadows, not against them. I would live with the light, not in its absence. I would remember, and in remembering I would live. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine to walk. The forest, with its infinite shadows and endless whispers, would always be with me. It would always be a part of who I was. And in that truth, I found my peace.